Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled twice by Fox and nearly became lost media forever? Or that Seth MacFarlane almost died in the September 11th attacks but missed his flight because of a hangover? Welcome to the bizarre, twisted, and absolutely fascinating world of Family Guy lore that most fans have never heard about. I'm talking about secrets so wild that they make the show's most outrageous episodes look tame by comparison. We're diving deep into the creation myths, the behind-the-scenes drama, the near-death experiences, and the corporate battles that shaped one of television's most controversial animated series. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never watch Family Guy the same way again. Let's start with something that will blow your mind. Seth MacFarlane, the creator and voice of Peter Griffin, Brian, and Stewie, was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 1-1 on September 11th, 2001. That's right, the same flight that crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. But here's the crazy part. He overslept because he was hungover from a party the night before and his travel agent had given him the wrong departure time. If he had made that flight, Family Guy would never have existed beyond its first season, and animation history would be completely different. But that's just the beginning of this incredible story. Family Guy has one of the most bizarre resurrection tales in television history. The show premiered in 1999 and was actually performing decently in the ratings, but Fox kept moving it around to different time slots. You know how networks love to do that, right? Well, they moved it so many times that viewers couldn't keep track of when it was on. Eventually, Fox canceled it in 2002 after just 3 seasons. Here's where it gets interesting, though. While the show was dead on television, something magical was happening in the afterlife. Adult Swim picked up the syndication rights and started airing reruns late at night. College students and young adults discovered the show and fell in love with it. At the same time, DVD sales were going through the roof. The first season DVD became one of the best-selling TV show DVDs of all time, and suddenly Fox realized they had made a massive mistake. So in 2005, Fox did something almost unprecedented in television history. They brought back a canceled show based purely on DVD sales and cable reruns. Family Guy became the first show ever to be revived solely because of its success in syndication and home video. It was like watching a TV show literally rise from the dead. But the resurrection story gets even weirder. When Fox brought the show back, they didn't just order a few episodes to test the waters. They ordered 53 new episodes right off the bat. That's an enormous vote of confidence for a show that had already been canceled once. Seth MacFarlane suddenly went from unemployed animator to one of the most powerful people in Hollywood practically overnight. Now let's talk about the creative origins of the show, because they're absolutely fascinating. Seth MacFarlane created Family Guy when he was just 24 years old, fresh out of the Rhode Island School of Design. But here's what most people don't know. The show was originally pitched as a much more traditional family sitcom. The early concepts were way more grounded and realistic than what we ended up with. The character of Peter Griffin was originally going to be much more like a typical TV dad, still bumbling and overweight, but not the complete psychopath we know and love today. Stewie wasn't even going to be particularly smart or evil in the original concept. He was just going to be a regular baby with maybe slightly advanced vocabulary. Brian was going to be a normal dog who occasionally made witty observations but wasn't going to be a full conversation partner for the family. What changed everything was Seth MacFarlane's love of old Hollywood and classic animation. He grew up watching Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry, and classic Disney cartoons, and he wanted to bring that level of visual comedy and surreal humor to primetime television. The problem was that most networks were terrified of anything too weird or experimental. Fox, however, was in a unique position in the late 90s. The Simpsons had proven that animated shows could work in prime time, but Fox was still considered the edgy, rebellious network. They were willing to take risks that ABC, CBS, and NBC would never consider. So when Seth pitched his cartoon about a dysfunctional family in Rhode Island, Fox was intrigued enough to order a pilot. The pilot episode is actually incredibly different from the show we know today. The animation style was cruder, the jokes were more straightforward, and the characters hadn't yet developed their extreme personalities. If you watch that original pilot, you can barely recognize it as the same show. It's like looking at baby photos of a celebrity. You can kind of see the resemblance, but it's clearly a work in progress. One of the most fascinating aspects of Family Guy's development is how the characters evolved over time. Take Stewie, for example. In the early seasons, he was genuinely trying to kill Lois and take over the world. His evil schemes were the driving force behind many episodes. But as the show went on, the writers realized that Stewie was funnier when he was dealing with more relatable problems, like sexuality, relationships, and growing up. This evolution wasn't accidental. It reflected Seth MacFarlane's own growth as a writer and person. When he created Stewie, MacFarlane was a young, single guy who thought evil baby plots were hilarious. But as he got older and more experienced, he realized that character-driven comedy was more sustainable than pure shock value. The same thing happened with Brian. Originally, he was just the voice of reason in the Griffin household, the one sane character who could comment on everyone else's craziness. But over time, the writers started exploring Brian's flaws and insecurities, turning him into one of the most complex characters on television. His pretentiousness, his failed writing career, his drinking problem, all of these traits developed organically as the show matured. Speaking of character development, let's talk about some of the inspiration behind the Griffin family. Peter Griffin was actually based on a security guard that Seth MacFarlane worked with during a summer job. The guy was loud, obnoxious, and completely inappropriate, but somehow lovable at the same time. MacFarlane found himself fascinated by how someone could be so offensive yet still maintain friendships and a family. Lois was inspired by MacFarlane's own mother, but also by the classic TV mom archetype. The twist was making her come from a wealthy family, which allowed the writers to explore themes of class and privilege. It also gave them an excuse to put the Griffins in situations they normally couldn't afford, like fancy parties and expensive vacations. The supporting characters have equally interesting origins. Glenn Quagmire was originally supposed to be a minor character who appeared in maybe 1 or 2 episodes, but Seth MacFarlane's voice performance was so distinctive and memorable that the writers kept bringing him back. The giggity giggity catchphrase wasn't even scripted. MacFarlane improvised it during recording, and everyone thought it was so funny that they made it Quagmire's signature sound. Cleveland Brown started as a simple background character, but MacFarlane realized that having a calm, reasonable neighbor made Peter's craziness even funnier by contrast. The character became so popular that he eventually got his own spin-off show, though that's a whole other story of corporate politics and creative struggles. One of the most controversial aspects of Family Guy is its use of cutaway gags, those random flashbacks that have nothing to do with the main plot. Some critics hate them, calling them lazy writing and cheap laughs. But here's the thing. Those cutaways were actually inspired by some of the most sophisticated comedy ever created. Seth MacFarlane grew up watching Monty Python's Flying Circus, and he was fascinated by how the Pythons would interrupt their sketches with completely random animations and non-sequiturs. He also loved the Marx Brothers movies, where the plot would screech to a halt for a musical number or a bizarre comedy bit that had nothing to do with anything else. The cutaway gags serve a specific purpose in Family Guy's comedy structure. They allow the writers to do jokes that would be impossible within the constraints of a normal sitcom plot. Want to make fun of a celebrity or reference an obscure movie? Just have Peter say, "This reminds me of the time I," and cut to whatever crazy scenario you can imagine. But here's something most fans don't realize. Many of those cutaways are actually incredibly expensive to produce. Each one requires new character designs, new backgrounds, new voice acting, and sometimes even new music. A single 30-second cutaway can cost more to animate than an entire scene of regular dialogue. Fox executives were initially horrified by how much money the show was spending on these seemingly throwaway jokes. The financial aspect of Family Guy is actually one of the most interesting parts of its story. When the show first premiered, animation was still considered a niche market for adults. The Simpsons was successful, but it was seen as a unique exception rather than proof that there was a broader market for animated comedy. Family Guy's success helped prove that there was actually a huge appetite for adult animated shows. This paved the way for series like American Dad, The Cleveland Show, Archer, Rick and Morty, and countless others. Without Family Guy's commercial success, the entire landscape of adult animation might look completely different today. The merchandising aspect is equally fascinating. Family Guy products generate hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue every year. T-shirts, toys, video games, Christmas ornaments, you name it, and there's probably a Family Guy version of it. The Stewie character alone has spawned an entire industry of baby-themed merchandise with surprisingly dark humor. But perhaps the most interesting aspect of Family Guy's cultural impact is how it changed the way we think about offensive comedy. The show pushes boundaries that would have been unthinkable on television even 10 years before it premiered. Yet somehow, it manages to get away with jokes that would destroy other shows. The secret is in the show's self-awareness. Family Guy knows that it's offensive, and it's constantly making jokes about its own offensiveness. When Peter does something terrible, the other characters usually call him out on it. When the show makes a controversial reference, it often follows it up with a joke about how inappropriate the reference was. This meta-humor creates a kind of protective bubble around the show's more controversial content. Viewers understand that they're not supposed to take Peter Griffin seriously as a role model. He's clearly meant to be a cautionary tale about what happens when someone has no filter and no self-awareness. The voice acting on Family Guy deserves its own deep dive because it's honestly incredible. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 of the main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire, plus dozens of supporting characters and celebrity impersonations. His range is absolutely mind-blowing when you really think about it. But here's what's even more impressive. MacFarlane often records conversations between his own characters. That means he's essentially having entire dramatic scenes with himself, switching between voices and maintaining the emotional continuity of multiple characters simultaneously. It's like watching a one-man theater performance every time you see Peter and Brian have a heart-to-heart conversation. The other voice actors are equally talented. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois, also does dozens of supporting characters, including the Griffin's maid Consuela. Mila Kunis took over the voice of Meg after the first season, and her performance evolved from simple teenager dialogue to some of the show's most emotionally complex moments. Seth Green voices Chris Griffin, and his portrayal perfectly captures that awkward teenage energy. Green actually ad-libs a lot of Chris's dialogue, particularly the character's weird sound effects and random observations. Many of Chris's funniest moments come from Green just improvising during recording sessions. The show's relationship with Fox has always been complicated and fascinating. On one hand, Family Guy makes enormous amounts of money for the network. On the other hand, it constantly creates controversy and pushes the boundaries of what's acceptable on broadcast television. There have been numerous instances where Fox executives have asked the writers to tone down certain jokes or storylines. Sometimes the writers comply, but often they find creative ways to work around the censorship. This has led to some incredibly clever wordplay and visual innuendo that's actually funnier than whatever the original joke was going to be. The international success of Family Guy is another interesting chapter in its story. The show airs in dozens of countries around the world, and each market has its own unique censorship challenges. Some countries cut entire scenes, while others dub over offensive dialogue with completely different jokes. In some markets, Stewie's sexuality is completely removed from his character arc. In others, references to religion or politics are heavily edited. This has created dozens of different versions of the show, each tailored to local sensitivities and cultural norms. Looking at Family Guy's legacy today, it's clear that the show fundamentally changed television comedy. It proved that audiences were hungry for more experimental, boundary-pushing content. It showed that animation could be a vehicle for sophisticated adult humor, not just children's entertainment. The show also pioneered many techniques that are now standard in comedy writing. The use of pop culture references as comedic shorthand, the mixing of high and low culture, the willingness to completely abandon plot for the sake of a good joke. These are all techniques that you can see in countless comedies today. But perhaps most importantly, Family Guy proved that television shows could have multiple lives. The fact that it survived cancellation and came back stronger than ever showed other creators that there were new paths to success beyond traditional network approval. As we wrap up this deep dive into Family Guy lore, it's worth noting that the show is still evolving and changing. Seth MacFarlane has stepped back from day-to-day involvement to focus on other projects, but the show continues under new leadership. Each season brings new controversies, new characters, and new ways to push the boundaries of what's possible on television. Whether you love it or hate it, Family Guy has left an indelible mark on popular culture. It's a show that dared to be different, survived multiple attempts to kill it, and emerged as one of the most successful and influential comedies of the modern era. And honestly, that's pretty giggity if you ask me. Did you know that Family Guy was actually dead and buried for 3 entire years? And when it came back from the grave, it changed television forever in ways you probably never realized? Stick around because what I'm about to tell you about the hidden depths of Family Guy will completely change how you see this seemingly simple cartoon. Most people think Family Guy is just random jokes and cutaway gags. But there's a secret layer of storytelling, hidden references, and behind-the-scenes drama that would make your head spin. From secret government conspiracies to real-world tragedies that shaped entire episodes, this show has more dark secrets than you might imagine. Let's start with something that sounds like a conspiracy theory but is absolutely true. Family Guy predicted major world events with scary accuracy. And I'm not talking about lucky guesses. We're talking about specific details that aired months or even years before they actually happened in real life. Remember the episode where Peter accidentally damages a bridge? That episode aired in 2005, showing a bridge collapse in remarkable detail. Less than 2 years later, the Minneapolis bridge collapse happened in almost identical circumstances. Coincidence? Maybe. But wait, there's more. The show also depicted airport security scenarios that became reality after major policy changes. Episodes showing specific security procedures aired before those exact procedures were implemented in real airports. Either Seth MacFarlane is a time traveler, or the writers were paying very close attention to patterns most people missed. But here's where it gets really weird. The show once depicted a very specific type of terrorist attack involving planes, and this aired before certain real-world events that I can't get too detailed about without this video getting demonetized. The point is, Family Guy wasn't just making random jokes about current events. They were somehow tapping into the collective unconscious of what was coming next. Now let's talk about the show's death and resurrection, because this story is wilder than any episode plot. Family Guy was canceled in 2002 after just 3 seasons. Fox executives thought it was done forever, but here's what they didn't expect. The DVD sales went absolutely insane. People were buying Family Guy DVDs like crazy, and more importantly, Adult Swim started running reruns that pulled in massive ratings. Fox realized they had made a huge mistake. The show wasn't just popular. It was building a cult following that was growing stronger every day it was off the air. When Family Guy came back in 2005, something had fundamentally changed. The writers knew they had been given a second chance, and they went absolutely wild with it. The humor got darker, the references got more obscure, and they started breaking the fourth wall in ways that no animated show had ever done before. But here's the part that most fans don't know. The cancellation and resurrection created a split personality within the show itself. There's pre-cancellation Family Guy and post-cancellation Family Guy, and they're almost like 2 different shows entirely. Pre-cancellation Family Guy was more grounded. Sure, it was weird, but the characters felt like real people with real problems. Post-cancellation Family Guy became something else entirely. It became a commentary on television itself. A show that was constantly aware it was a show. This shift created what television historians now call the meta-revolution. Family Guy showed other animated shows that you could break every rule, reference your own existence, and make fun of the very network that pays you and still be successful. South Park, Rick and Morty, and countless other shows followed this blueprint. Speaking of breaking rules, let's talk about the episodes that almost didn't make it to air. There's a whole vault of Family Guy content that was deemed too controversial, too dark, or too legally problematic to broadcast. Some of these episodes have become legendary among fans who have never seen them. One infamous episode dealt with a real-world tragedy in such a specific way that it would have caused massive backlash. The episode was fully animated, voiced, and scored, but it was pulled at the last minute. Only a handful of people have ever seen it, and they're bound by non-disclosure agreements. Another banned episode featured a storyline that involved real political figures in scenarios that would have caused international incidents. The legal department shut it down so hard that even mentioning specific details could result in lawsuits. But here's what's fascinating about these banned episodes. They show just how far Seth MacFarlane and his team were willing to push boundaries. They weren't just making a cartoon. They were conducting social experiments to see what society would tolerate. This brings us to one of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy lore: the show's relationship with censorship and standards. Every episode that makes it to air represents hundreds of battles fought behind the scenes between the writers and network executives. The writers developed an elaborate system for getting controversial content past the censors. They would intentionally include material they knew would be rejected, so that when they fought to keep the stuff they really wanted, it would seem reasonable by comparison. It's psychological warfare disguised as comedy writing. This strategy works so well that other shows started copying it. The Family Guy approach to dealing with censorship became the industry standard for pushing boundaries on television. Now let's dive into the character origins, because the backstories of these characters are way darker and more complex than you'd expect from a comedy show. Peter Griffin wasn't always the lovable idiot we know today. In early concept art and scripts, he was genuinely disturbing, almost psychopathic in his behavior. The writers had to gradually soften Peter's character because test audiences found him genuinely unlikable. But traces of that original darker Peter still show up in certain episodes, creating this weird cognitive dissonance where you're laughing at someone who, if you really think about it, should probably be in prison. Stewie's character evolution is even more interesting. He was originally conceived as a pure villain, a baby bent on world domination with no redeeming qualities. But as the show progressed, the writers started exploring what would make a baby want to destroy everything, and they discovered something profound about childhood trauma and family dynamics. The gradual softening of Stewie from villain to complex character represents one of the most sophisticated character development arcs in television comedy. But it happens so slowly that most viewers didn't even notice it was happening. Brian's character might be the most tragic of all. He represents the writer's own struggles with depression, alcoholism, and the feeling of being trapped in a life that doesn't match your dreams. Every time Brian has an existential crisis, it's the writers working through their own psychological issues on screen. This is why Brian's temporary death hit fans so hard. It wasn't just killing off a character, it was the writers symbolically killing off the part of themselves that they saw in Brian. When they brought him back, it represented their own decision to keep fighting through depression and creative frustration. The show's relationship with its own success is another layer of complexity that most fans miss. Family Guy became so popular that it started influencing real-world culture, but this success created a feedback loop that began changing the show itself. References to Family Guy started showing up in other TV shows, movies, and even news broadcasts. Politicians started making Family Guy references in speeches. The show went from commenting on culture to actually shaping culture, and this shift is reflected in the later seasons. The writers became increasingly aware that they were creating cultural touchstones, and this awareness changed how they approached comedy. Jokes that might have been throwaway gags in early seasons became carefully crafted cultural commentary in later seasons. This evolution created what media scholars call the recursive effect, where a piece of media becomes so influential that it starts commenting on its own influence. Family Guy didn't just break the fourth wall, it demolished the entire theater. Let's talk about the real-world consequences of Family Guy's cultural impact. The show has been credited with changing how people communicate, particularly in how they use pop culture references in everyday conversation. Before Family Guy, pop culture references in conversation were usually recent and obvious. After Family Guy, people started making increasingly obscure references, creating entire conversations that were essentially elaborate chains of cultural callbacks. This changed how humor works in social situations. The show also influenced how other media uses cutaway gags and non sequiturs. Everything from commercials to political campaigns started using Family Guy-style random humor to grab attention and create memorable moments. But perhaps the most significant impact was on censorship standards across all media. Family Guy pushed boundaries so consistently and successfully that it expanded what was considered acceptable on television. Shows that came after could go places that wouldn't have been possible before Family Guy paved the way. The voice acting in Family Guy deserves its own deep dive because there are layers of performance art happening that most people completely miss. Seth MacFarlane doesn't just voice multiple characters. He creates distinct psychological profiles for each voice that reflect different aspects of his own personality. Peter represents 10. MacFarlane's id, his impulse-driven, consequence-ignoring side. Brian represents his superego, his intellectual, morally concerned side. Stewie represents his ego, his ambitious, attention-seeking side. The show is essentially one person having a conversation with different aspects of himself. This psychological complexity extends to the guest voices as well. When celebrities appear on Family Guy, they're not just doing celebrity cameos. They're being integrated into this complex psychological ecosystem that MacFarlane has created. The show's approach to celebrity culture is particularly sophisticated. Rather than just making fun of celebrities, Family Guy examines the psychological impact of fame on both celebrities and the people who consume celebrity culture. This brings us to one of the most overlooked aspects of Family Guy, its commentary on media consumption itself. The show constantly references other TV shows, movies, and cultural phenomena, but it's not just making references for the sake of references. Each reference serves as a commentary on how media shapes our understanding of reality. When Peter acts out scenes from movies, he's demonstrating how deeply fictional narratives penetrate real human behavior. When the show parodies other TV shows, it's examining how different formats and styles influence how we process information. The cutaway gags aren't random interruptions. They're demonstrations of how the human mind actually works. We don't think in linear narratives. We think in associations, tangents, and random connections. Family Guy mirrors the actual structure of human consciousness. This psychological accuracy is why the show resonates so deeply with audiences. It's not just funny, it's cognitively familiar. The chaos of Family Guy matches the chaos of our own internal mental experience. The show's treatment of social issues is another area where there's more depth than meets the eye. While Family Guy often appears to make jokes at the expense of sensitive topics, careful analysis reveals a more complex approach to social commentary. The show uses humor to make serious points more palatable, but it also uses humor to expose the absurdity of certain social attitudes. When characters make prejudiced statements, they're usually portrayed as idiotic or ignorant, effectively undermining the attitudes they're expressing. This technique allows the show to address controversial topics without preaching, but it also creates ambiguity about what the show actually believes. This ambiguity is intentional, forcing viewers to think critically about the issues being presented rather than passively accepting predetermined conclusions. As we wrap up this exploration of Family Guy's hidden depths, it's worth considering what this all means for the future of comedy in television. Family Guy didn't just entertain audiences. It fundamentally changed what television could be and do. The show proved that audiences were hungry for more complex, self-aware entertainment that challenged traditional narrative structures. It demonstrated that comedy could be a vehicle for serious psychological and social exploration without losing its entertainment value. Most importantly, Family Guy showed that taking creative risks, even when they result in cancellation, can ultimately lead to greater success than playing it safe. The show's death and resurrection became a template for how creative properties can find new life through changing audience behaviors and consumption patterns. So the next time you watch Family Guy, remember that you're not just watching a cartoon about a dysfunctional family. You're watching a sophisticated piece of media art that changed television forever, influenced how we communicate with each other, and continues to push boundaries in ways that most viewers never fully appreciate. The real genius of Family Guy isn't in any single joke or episode. It's in how it managed to hide all this complexity behind what appears to be simple, silly humor. That's the ultimate magic trick, and it's still working after all these years. Have you ever wondered what makes Family Guy the perfect show to fall asleep to? Tonight, we're diving deep into the wonderfully weird world of Quahog to uncover some fascinating facts that might just help you understand why millions of people drift off to this animated chaos every single night. But first, let me ask you something. What if I told you that the baby genius who plots world domination actually has one of the most tragic character arcs in television history? Or that there's a scientific reason why Peter Griffin's voice might be the ultimate sleep aid? Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll never look at your bedtime Family Guy marathon the same way again. Let's start with something that'll blow your mind. Stewie Griffin, that diabolical infant with the posh British accent, wasn't always the character we know today. In the original concept, he was supposed to be much darker and more sinister. The show's creator, Seth MacFarlane, initially envisioned him as a genuinely evil character whose plans would occasionally succeed. But here's the fascinating part that most fans don't realize. Stewie's entire personality is built on a foundation of insecurity and loneliness that makes him oddly relatable, especially during those late-night viewing sessions when you're feeling a bit isolated yourself. The genius baby's accent tells us everything we need to know about human psychology. In one of the show's most revealing moments, Stewie admits in therapy that his British accent is completely fake. He adopted it to sound smarter and more sophisticated than everyone around him. It's essentially vocal armor designed to protect his vulnerable core. This resonates with so many viewers because we all put on masks to hide our insecurities. When you're lying in bed at 3 in the morning, there's something comforting about a character who's also struggling with authenticity. But here's where it gets really interesting. The show deliberately keeps it ambiguous whether other characters can actually understand Stewie. Sometimes they respond to him. Sometimes they completely ignore his elaborate monologues about world domination. This creates a dreamlike quality that perfectly mirrors the state between waking and sleeping. Your brain doesn't have to work too hard to follow rigid logic because the show itself operates on dream logic. Speaking of dream logic, let's talk about the show's relationship with time and reality. Family Guy is famous for its cutaway gags that transport viewers to completely different scenarios mid-episode. One moment Peter is arguing with Lois about dinner. The next moment we're watching a historical flashback about Napoleon's bathroom habits. These rapid shifts in context actually mimic the way our minds work when we're falling asleep, jumping from thought to thought without linear connection. The show's approach to continuity is another sleep-inducing factor. Characters die and come back to life, major events get completely forgotten by the next episode, and the family somehow never ages despite running for over 2 decades. This lack of consequences creates a safe space for your mind. You don't need to worry about emotional investment or following complex storylines. It's mental comfort food. Now let's examine the voice acting, because this is where the science gets really interesting. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple main characters, including Peter, Brian, and Stewie. The consistency of hearing the same vocal patterns creates a subconscious sense of familiarity and safety. Peter's voice in particular has a rhythmic, almost hypnotic quality that many sleep specialists would recognize as naturally soothing. The slight nasal tone and steady pacing can actually help regulate breathing patterns. Brian Griffin represents something unique in the Family Guy universe. As the talking dog who serves as the show's voice of reason, he often delivers philosophical observations and cultural commentary. But here's what makes him perfect for sleep viewing. His conversations with Stewie frequently dive into existential topics without becoming too heavy or anxiety-provoking. They discuss the meaning of life, mortality, and purpose in ways that feel profound but never overwhelming. It's like having a gentle philosophical discussion as you drift off to sleep. The show's approach to controversial topics is surprisingly sophisticated when you analyze it from a sleep psychology perspective. While Family Guy is known for pushing boundaries, it does so in such an over-the-top way that it becomes almost cartoonish rather than genuinely disturbing. This allows viewers to process difficult subjects without the emotional intensity that would keep them awake. It's social commentary wrapped in enough absurdity to feel safe. Let's dive into the Griffin family dynamics, because they reveal something fascinating about comfort viewing. Despite all their dysfunction, the family always comes back together by the end of each episode. Peter might do something incredibly stupid. Lois might lose her temper. Meg might face another humiliation, but they remain a unit. This predictable structure provides emotional security. No matter how chaotic things get, you know everything will essentially reset by the next episode. The show's treatment of Meg Griffin deserves special attention. As the perpetually misunderstood teenager who faces constant rejection and ridicule, She represents the part of ourselves we're most insecure about. But the show's portrayal of her suffering is so exaggerated that it becomes therapeutic rather than depressing. It's like having your own adolescent anxieties reflected back to you in such an extreme way that they lose their power to hurt you. Chris Griffin, the dim-witted but kind-hearted son, provides another layer of comfort. His innocence and genuine sweetness create moments of unexpected warmth throughout the show. When everything else is cynical and sarcastic, Chris offers glimpses of pure, uncomplicated emotion. These moments work like pressure valves, releasing tension just when the cynicism might become overwhelming. The show's relationship with pop culture creates a unique viewing experience that's perfect for repeat watching. The references span decades, from obscure 70s television shows to current internet memes. This means different jokes land differently depending on your age, mood, and current knowledge base. You can watch the same episode multiple times and discover new layers, but the discovery process is gentle and rewarding rather than demanding. Family Guy's animation style contributes to its sleep-friendliness in subtle but important ways. The character designs are simple and rounded, avoiding sharp angles or jarring visual elements that might startle viewers. The color palette is warm and familiar, dominated by the cozy yellows and browns of the Griffin home. Even during action sequences or fantastical cutaways, the visual style remains consistent and non-threatening. The show's musical elements deserve recognition too. From Stewie and Brian's elaborate musical numbers to Peter's improvised songs, music is woven throughout the series in ways that create rhythm and flow. These musical interludes often serve as natural breaking points, giving your brain permission to zone out or drift away. The songs are catchy enough to be memorable, but rarely complex enough to demand active listening. One of the most brilliant aspects of Family Guy's sleep appeal is its relationship with repetition. The show has been running for so long that certain gags and character interactions have become ritualistic. Peter fighting the giant chicken, Stewie's elaborate revenge plots against Lois, Brian's pretentious literary aspirations. These recurring elements create a sense of familiarity that can be deeply comforting for regular viewers. The show's approach to violence is another key factor. While there's plenty of cartoon violence, it's always presented in such an unrealistic way that it never feels genuinely threatening. Characters get blown up, shot, crushed, and dismembered, only to appear completely fine in the next scene. This consequence-free violence allows viewers to experience excitement and tension without any lasting anxiety. Let's talk about the show's treatment of mortality, because this might be the most important element for sleep viewing. Death appears frequently in Family Guy, but it's always treated as either temporary or comedic rather than genuinely tragic. Characters die and return, discuss death casually, and face mortal peril without real consequences. For viewers dealing with their own mortality anxieties, especially late at night, this approach can be surprisingly therapeutic. The writing style of Family Guy creates a unique rhythm that mirrors natural sleep patterns. Episodes often start with high-energy scenarios that gradually wind down through various subplots and cutaways. By the time you reach the resolution, the pacing has naturally slowed, making it easier to transition into actual sleep. It's like the show is designed to help you power down. Family Guy's relationship with nostalgia is complex and comforting. The show constantly references and parodies elements from decades past, creating a sense of collective cultural memory. Whether it's a reference to an 80s movie, a 70s television show, or a 90s commercial, these callbacks create connections to simpler times. For many viewers, this nostalgic element provides emotional comfort that eases the transition to sleep. The show's approach to relationships and romance offers another layer of sleep-friendly content. Despite all the dysfunction and crude humor, there are genuine moments of love and connection between characters. Peter and Lois, despite their constant conflicts, clearly love each other. Stewie and Brian, despite their differences, have formed an everyday, unlikely but deep friendship. These relationship dynamics provide emotional warmth without demanding too much investment. Here's something most people don't realize about Family Guy's structure. The show operates on multiple levels of engagement. You can watch it as pure background noise, letting the familiar voices and music wash over you. You can engage with the surface-level humor and sight gags. Or You can dive deep into the cultural references and character development. This flexibility makes it perfect for different stages of falling asleep. The show's treatment of everyday situations is particularly sleep-friendly. Many episodes revolve around mundane domestic issues like household chores, neighbor disputes, or family dinners that somehow spiral into elaborate adventures. But no matter how wild things get, they always return to the familiar setting of the Griffin home. This creates a sense of adventure within safety, excitement within security. Family Guy's approach to current events and social issues provides another comfort layer. The show comments on politics, social trends, and cultural phenomena, but always through the lens of cartoon absurdity. This allows viewers to engage with real-world concerns without the anxiety that usually accompanies such topics. It's like having a pressure release valve for contemporary stress. The show's episodic nature means you never have to worry about missing crucial plot developments if you fall asleep mid-episode. While there are occasionally multi-part episodes or recurring storylines, the vast majority of episodes are self-contained. This removes the anxiety about keeping up with complex narratives and allows your mind to relax completely. As we wrap up this deep dive into why Family Guy has become the ultimate sleep companion for millions of viewers, remember that comfort viewing is a deeply personal experience. What works for one person might not work for another, but there's something undeniably special about a show that can make you laugh, think, and ultimately feel at peace, all within the span of 22 minutes. The genius of Family Guy as a sleep aid lies in its perfect balance of engagement and relaxation. It's stimulating enough to occupy your conscious mind and prevent anxious thoughts from taking over, but familiar and comforting enough to allow your subconscious to begin the journey towards sleep. Whether you're drawn to Stewie's elaborate schemes, Peter's childlike wonder, or Brian's philosophical musings, there's something in this animated chaos for everyone. So the next time you find yourself reaching for that remote at bedtime, remember that you're not just choosing mindless entertainment. You're selecting a carefully crafted comfort blanket that's helped millions of people transition from the stresses of the day into peaceful rest. Sweet dreams, and remember, in Quahog, everything always works out in the end. Hey there, night owls and Family Guy fanatics. If you're settling in for some late-night entertainment and your brain is ready to drift off into dreamland, I've got the perfect collection of wild Family Guy facts that'll either help you doze off peacefully or keep you wide awake wondering how this show even exists. Tonight, we're diving deep into the bizarre, chaotic, and absolutely insane world of everyone's favorite dysfunctional animated family. Let me start with something that'll blow your mind right off the bat. Did you know that Peter Griffin has an astronomical body count that would make serial killers jealous? We're talking thousands of deaths, and honestly, most of them happened in the most ridiculous ways possible. This isn't your typical cartoon violence where characters bounce back with cartoon physics. Peter has legitimately caused more destruction than some natural disasters. Speaking of Peter's mayhem, his very first kill happened way back in the second episode of the entire series. Remember that Roadrunner from Looney Tunes? Yeah, Peter straight up ran that bird down with his car, flattening it completely. What makes this even funnier is Peter's reaction afterward, casually asking if he hit an ostrich while the Roadrunner is clearly pancaked on his windshield. This moment basically set the tone for everything that would follow in the series. But here's where things get really wild. Peter once literally took over Death's job in the show, and with that cosmic responsibility came the power to kill people just by touching them. During his stint as the Grim Reaper, he accidentally killed 2 airplane pilots mid-flight simply because he forgot to wear mittens. Can you imagine being a passenger on that plane? Thankfully, actress Karen Black was somehow there to land the aircraft, or everyone would have died in that crash too. The hospital incidents are particularly disturbing when you think about them. Peter somehow convinced people to let him work as a doctor, which is terrifying enough on its own, but then he actually killed a patient during what should have been a routine procedure. The patient even thanked Peter for saving his life right before dying, which adds this darkly comedic layer that only Family Guy could pull off. Here's a fact that might help you sleep better or give you nightmares, depending on your perspective. Peter once worked as a babysitter and literally left a baby to drown in a bathtub. He casually walked away, leaving behind drain cleaner in case of clogs, soap next to a radio, and towels on the roof. The complete negligence and absurdity of this situation perfectly captures Peter's character. He's simultaneously well-meaning and catastrophically incompetent. The show took Peter's violence to cinematic levels during various parody episodes. When they did their Kill Bill homage, Peter went full samurai warrior mode, engaging in what can only be described as a sword-fighting bloodbath. The choreography was surprisingly well animated for a show that usually relies on simple character movements, and Peter managed to take down 15 opponents all by himself in pure martial arts mayhem. Then there's Peter's brief career as a superhero parody called Red Stool, which was obviously their take on Deadpool. The name comes from the fact that his cancer specifically affected his rear end, because of course Family Guy would go there. As Red Stool, Peter maintained Deadpool's tendency for extreme violence, adding several more bodies to his ever-growing count while cracking inappropriate jokes the entire time. The Walter White parody deserves special mention because it perfectly captured the essence of Breaking Bad while maintaining Family Guy's signature chaos. Peter as Heisenberg was just as dangerous as the original, dropping bodies left and right while somehow making it comedically absurd rather than genuinely threatening. The transformation from bumbling father to calculating criminal mastermind was surprisingly well executed for a show known more for cutaway gags than character development. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Peter's violence is how it affects his own family. He once accidentally killed his entire family through carbon monoxide poisoning, and his reaction was essentially wondering if his day's work was worth it. Sure, they all came back in the next episode because cartoon logic, but the casual way Peter processes causing his loved ones' deaths is genuinely unsettling when you think about it too deeply. The fight scenes with Ernie the Giant Chicken are legendary among Family Guy fans, and for good reason. These battles have spanned multiple episodes and caused more collateral damage than most action movies. They've fought in airports, construction sites, moving trains, and even hijacked time machines to battle across different historical periods. The destruction they cause is absolutely massive, with buildings collapsing, vehicles exploding, and innocent bystanders getting caught in their ridiculous feud. What makes the chicken fights even more absurd is that they started over an expired coupon. Think about that for a moment. These two characters have caused thousands of deaths, millions of dollars in property damage, and untold chaos across multiple dimensions, all because of a disagreement about a coupon's validity. It's the perfect example of Family Guy's ability to take tiny conflicts and escalate them to world-ending proportions. The time travel elements in their fights add another layer of complexity and destruction. When Peter and Ernie crash through different time periods, they're not just affecting the present day, they're literally altering history itself. The poor driver of that futuristic train they destroyed was probably just trying to get to work in his cyberpunk timeline. And suddenly, he's vaporized because two idiots from the early 21st century decided to continue their grocery store dispute across the space-time continuum. Here's something that might surprise you. Peter has actually caused more deaths through his various acts of terrorism, albeit usually accidental ones. When he befriended a terrorist named Mahmoud, Peter was completely oblivious to what was happening. All he cared about was the attention and perks of his new friendship. When Mahmoud gave him what Peter thought was a phone, he kept trying to use it to make calls, not realizing it was actually a bomb detonator. The explosions that resulted from Peter's innocent phone calls were catastrophic. Each time he tried to dial Mahmoud, another building would explode somewhere in the city. The fact that Peter remained completely clueless about what was happening makes it both hilarious and terrifying. Even when the gang managed to stop Mahmoud's planned attack on a bridge, Peter still had that detonator and used it again while trying to call a restaurant for reservations. The crossover episode with The Simpsons showcased Peter's destructive capabilities on an even grander scale. His fight with Homer Simpson leveled entire city blocks and resulted in mass casualties that would normally be associated with natural disasters or military conflicts. The two fathers' brawl started over Peter insulting The Simpsons show, which escalated into a city-destroying conflict that somehow ended with both characters gaining superpowers from radioactive waste. One particularly disturbing sequence involved Peter's brief stint as a high school student, where he arranged for a school shooting to get revenge on popular kids who ignored him. Even though he called it off at the last minute, the attack still went through, and the screams and gunshots in the background suggest multiple casualties among innocent children. This episode aired during a time when such events were unfortunately becoming more common in real life, making Peter's involvement even more unsettling. Peter's various explosions of hospitals deserve special mentioned for their sheer scale of destruction. When he disagreed with vaccines, he dressed as the Joker and blew up an entire medical facility just to prevent Stewie from getting a shot. The explosion was massive enough to level the building and likely killed dozens of patients, doctors, nurses, and staff members who were just trying to provide health care. But he didn't stop there. Peter later destroyed a children's hospital in another equally senseless act of destruction. The casual way the show presents these incidents, with Peter treating the explosions like minor inconveniences rather than mass casualty events, perfectly captures the dark comedy that Family Guy specializes in. It's simultaneously hilarious and deeply disturbing. The missile incidents showcase Peter's ability to cause destruction on a military scale. During his fight with President Trump, Peter's head got slammed onto a big red button that launched multiple missiles. Each missile likely killed hundreds of people in massive explosions, turning what started as a personal dispute into an international incident with catastrophic consequences. What's particularly interesting about Peter's character is how the show manages to make him sympathetic despite his astronomical body count. He's never intentionally malicious. He's just incredibly stupid and impulsive with access to dangerous situations. This combination makes him simultaneously lovable and terrifying, which is probably why the character has remained popular for over 2 decades. The physics of Peter's destruction often defy logic, even by cartoon standards. When he and Ernie crashed that Ferris wheel, it rolled through the city like a massive wheel of death, flattening everything in its path. The scale of destruction was apocalyptic, but it was presented with such absurd cartoon logic that viewers could laugh at it rather than being horrified by the implications. Peter's various career changes always seem to result in multiple casualties. Whether he's working as a doctor, babysitter, death himself, or any other profession, people end up dying as a direct result of his incompetence. It's actually impressive how consistently dangerous he is across all walks of life. There's literally no job safe enough for Peter Griffin to perform without causing fatalities. The show's commitment to continuity regarding Peter's violence is surprisingly strong for a series that usually ignores consequences. Characters who die in one episode rarely come back, unless there's a specific plot reason, and the destruction Peter causes often gets referenced in later episodes. This attention to detail makes his actions feel more impactful than typical cartoon violence. Here's a fun sleeping fact. The total estimated death toll directly caused by Peter Griffin throughout the series is approaching 3,000 people. That number includes direct kills, collateral damage from his fights, explosions he's caused, and various accidents resulting from his stupidity. To put that in perspective, Peter has personally caused more deaths than many historical disasters. The international incidents Peter has triggered would realistically make him one of the most wanted criminals on the planet. He's blown up bridges, destroyed government buildings, launched military missiles, and caused diplomatic crises with multiple countries. Yet somehow he continues living his normal suburban life without any legal consequences, which is perhaps the most unrealistic aspect of a show featuring a talking baby and a martini-drinking dog. As you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in the Family Guy universe, Peter Griffin is probably causing another catastrophe that will add to his ever-growing body count. Sweet dreams, and maybe avoid any neighborhoods where middle-aged men are having disputes with large poultry. In the world of Family Guy, such conflicts have a tendency to escalate into city-leveling disasters that make natural catastrophes look like minor inconveniences. The beautiful absurdity of Peter's character is that despite being responsible for more destruction than most fictional supervillains, he's still somehow the protagonist we're supposed to root for. That's the magic of Family Guy, taking the most inappropriate situations and making them laugh out loud funny through sheer audacity and perfect comedic timing. Now close your eyes and let these wonderfully bizarre facts carry you off into dreamland, where hopefully giant chickens and expired coupons can't hurt you. Picture this. You're lying in bed, ready to drift off, and someone mentions Family Guy facts. Suddenly, your brain lights up like a Christmas tree, and sleep becomes impossible. Well, tonight, we're embracing the chaos with the most bizarre, hilarious, and downright shocking facts about everyone's favorite dysfunctional animated family. So get comfortable, because these Family Guy secrets are about to blow your mind. Let's start with something that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about the show. Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice by Fox. The first time was in 2002 after just 3 seasons. But here's where it gets wild. The show's resurrection had nothing to do with critical acclaim or network executives suddenly realizing their mistake. It was all about DVD sales and late-night reruns on Adult Swim. The fans literally brought this show back from the dead through pure dedication and binge-watching. But that's just the beginning of the madness. Did you know that Seth MacFarlane almost died on September 11, 2001? He was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11, the first plane to hit the World Trade Center. The only reason he missed that flight was because he had been out drinking the night before, and his travel agent had given him the wrong departure time. He showed up to the airport hungover and 15 minutes too late. Talk about a sliding doors moment that changed television history forever. Speaking of Seth MacFarlane, this guy is basically a one-man entertainment machine. He doesn't just voice multiple characters on the show. He voices Peter Griffin, Brian the dog, Stewie, Glenn Quagmire, and Carter Pewterschmidt, plus several other recurring characters. That means when Peter and Brian are having a conversation, it's literally just Seth talking to himself in different voices. The recording sessions must be absolutely bonkers. Now, here's a fact that'll mess with your head. The show's signature cutaway gags, those random flashbacks that interrupt the main story, weren't originally part of the plan. They started as a way to fill time when episodes were running short. But they became so popular that they're now considered the show's trademark. Some episodes have been built entirely around these seemingly random interruptions. Let's talk about the characters for a moment, because there are some seriously twisted details hiding beneath the surface. Take Stewie Griffin, the diabolical baby genius. His character was originally inspired by the child character from the British sitcom The Onedin Line, but with a much darker twist. The writers have confirmed that Stewie has an incredibly high body count throughout the series, and we're not talking about toy soldiers here. In various episodes, Stewie has eliminated family members, strangers, celebrities, and even historical figures. There was that time he burned down a playhouse with children inside because he caught his girlfriend cheating. Then there's the episode where he takes out a prostitute with a sniper rifle for absolutely no reason other than target practice. And let's not forget when he dressed up as Santa and traumatized an entire family on Christmas morning, leaving behind what can only be described as a holiday horror scene. But Stewie's kill count gets exponentially more insane when you factor in his partnership with Penelope, his equally psychotic girlfriend. Together, they embarked on a global destruction spree that included bombing the Great Wall of China, destroying the Eiffel Tower, and creating a tidal wave that wiped out Copenhagen. When you add up all the casualties from their international terrorism campaign, we're talking about millions of victims. This baby character has technically committed genocide multiple times. The really disturbing part is how casually the show treats these mass casualty events. They're played for laughs, but when you actually sit down and think about the implications, Stewie, Griffin might be one of the most prolific fictional killers in television history. And he's supposed to be a 1-year-old baby. Moving away from the murder and mayhem, let's dive into some behind-the-scenes secrets that are equally fascinating. The show's animation style has evolved dramatically over the years, but not always in ways you'd expect. The early seasons were animated using traditional cell animation techniques, but the show switched to digital animation in later seasons. However, they deliberately kept certain imperfections in the animation to maintain that slightly rough, hand-drawn aesthetic that fans loved. Here's something that'll surprise you about the voice acting. Several major celebrity guest stars have appeared on the show, but many of them recorded their lines over the phone or via video call. This means some of your favorite celebrity cameos were literally phoned in, quite literally. The production team became masters at making these remote recordings sound like they were recorded in the same studio as the main cast. The show's musical numbers are another hidden gem of complexity. Seth MacFarlane, being a professional singer himself, often performs the songs live with a full orchestra. Those elaborate musical sequences you see in episodes aren't just animated afterthoughts. They're often recorded with full big band arrangements, complete with brass sections and professional backup singers. The amount of production value that goes into a 3-minute cartoon musical number rivals what you'd see in actual Broadway shows. But here's where things get really weird with the show's continuity. Family Guy exists in a universe where almost anything can happen, and the writers take full advantage of this freedom. Characters die and come back to life regularly. The family has traveled through time, met their alternate universe selves, and even broken the fourth wall to acknowledge that they're cartoon characters. This narrative flexibility allows for some truly bizarre storylines that would be impossible in live-action television. One of the most mind-bending aspects of the show is how it handles character development, or rather, how it deliberately avoids it. Unlike most long-running series where characters grow and change over time, Family Guy operates on what's essentially a reset button philosophy. No matter what happens in an episode, everyone goes back to their baseline personalities by the next episode. This means Peter can learn valuable life lessons, die, get married again, become president, or transform into a completely different person, and none of it matters the following week. This approach extends to the show's relationship with its own mythology. Remember when Brian died and was replaced by a new dog named Vinny? The fan outrage was so intense that the writers brought Brian back to life just a few episodes later. But rather than pretend the death never happened, they incorporated the resurrection into the show's time travel mythology. It's this kind of meta-storytelling that keeps fans constantly guessing about what's real and what's just another throwaway gag. The cultural impact of Family Guy extends far beyond just being a popular cartoon. The show has influenced internet meme culture in ways that most people don't even realize. That "oh no" chicken fight scene between Peter and the giant chicken has become a template for depicting extended, over-the-top cartoon violence. The "it insists upon itself" quote about The Godfather has become shorthand for pretentious film criticism. And don't even get me started on how many internet arguments have been settled by simply posting a Family Guy cutaway gag. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the show is how it serves as a time capsule for American pop culture over the past 2 decades. Episodes from the early 2000s are filled with references to celebrities, movies, and cultural phenomena that were huge at the time but have since been forgotten. Watching old episodes is like taking a trip through a museum of pop culture history, complete with all the embarrassing fashion choices and forgotten scandals. The show's approach to controversial topics has always been deliberately provocative. The writers seem to take a perverse pleasure in pushing boundaries and seeing how far they can go before someone complains. But here's the thing that's often overlooked. Beneath all the shock value and offensive humor, the show actually has a surprisingly progressive worldview on many social issues. It just packages that progressivism in such outrageous wrapping that people miss the actual message. Take the character of Brian, the family dog. On the surface, he's just a talking dog who drinks martinis and has pretensions of being an intellectual. But Brian often serves as the show's moral compass, calling out the other characters when they do terrible things. His relationship with the family, particularly with Stewie, represents some of the show's most genuine emotional moments. When Brian temporarily died, the fan reaction wasn't just about losing a funny character. People were genuinely heartbroken because Brian represented the heart of the show. The animation team behind Family Guy has developed some truly innovative techniques over the years. Those elaborate fight scenes, particularly the ones involving Peter and the giant chicken, require months of planning and animation work. The sequences are choreographed like actual action movies, with careful attention paid to pacing, camera angles, and dramatic timing. The fact that all this effort goes into animating a man fighting a poultry mascot is both absurd and oddly impressive. Here's a production secret that most fans don't know. The show's writers often create multiple versions of controversial jokes, starting with the most extreme version and then gradually toning it down until they find something that Fox will actually allow on television. This means, for every outrageous joke that makes it into an episode, there are probably 3 or 4 even more outrageous versions sitting in a file somewhere. The merchandising empire built around Family Guy is absolutely massive. There are Family Guy branded everything from coffee mugs to car accessories to clothing lines. But the most surprising merchandising success has been Stewie Griffin baby products. Yes, parents are apparently comfortable decorating their nurseries with imagery of a homicidal infant genius. The irony is probably lost on most consumers, but it's definitely not lost on the show's creators. One aspect of the show that deserves more recognition is its musical sophistication. Seth MacFarlane's background as a professional musician shows up constantly in the series. The show regularly features complex musical arrangements, sophisticated harmonies, and genre pastiche that demonstrates a deep understanding of American musical traditions. When Family Guy does a musical number, it's not just a cartoon singing a silly song, it's often a legitimate piece of musical entertainment that could stand on its own. The show's relationship with censorship has always been complicated. While Fox allows Family Guy to get away with content that would never fly on network television during prime time, the show still operates under certain restrictions. The writers have become masters at implying things they can't show directly. Sometimes the most shocking moments happen entirely off-screen, letting your imagination fill in the disturbing details. This brings us to one of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy's comedy philosophy. The show doesn't just break the fourth wall occasionally, it demolishes the fourth wall completely and then rebuilds it just so it can break it again. Characters regularly acknowledge that they're in a television show, comment on their own animation style, and even complain about changes in their voice actors. This level of meta humor was revolutionary when the show started, and it's still pushing boundaries today. The international versions of Family Guy are fascinating studies in cultural adaptation. Different countries have had to handle the show's content in wildly different ways. Some countries censor entire episodes, while others rewrite dialogue completely to make cultural references more relevant to local audiences. There are probably versions of Family Guy exist where the characters are having completely different conversations while their mouths move to the original English dialogue. As we wrap up this deep dive into Family Guy's bizarre universe, it's worth reflecting on why these facts are so compelling. There's something oddly comforting about learning the secrets behind a show that's designed to be completely unpredictable. Even when Family Guy is at its most chaotic and nonsensical, there are real people behind the scenes making deliberate, creative choices, putting enormous effort into crafting these moments of animated insanity. The show has managed to maintain its relevance for over 2 decades by constantly evolving while never losing its core identity. It's simultaneously one of the most juvenile shows on television and one of the most sophisticated pieces of pop culture commentary ever created. That contradiction is probably the most Family Guy thing of all. So the next time you're channel surfing and stumble across a Family Guy rerun, remember that you're not just watching a cartoon about a dysfunctional family. You're experiencing a complex piece of entertainment that represents millions of hours of creative work, countless cultural references, and enough behind-the-scenes drama to fill several seasons of reality television. Sweet dreams, and may your Family Guy nightmares be filled with giant chicken fights and Stewie's diabolical laughter echoing through your subconscious. Picture this. You're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone at 2 a.m., when suddenly you realize something terrifying. The wholesome suburban mom from Family Guy might actually be one of television's most dangerous criminals. Tonight, we're diving deep into the bizarre, shocking, and downright unbelievable world of random Family Guy facts that'll keep your mind spinning as you drift off to sleep. Before we jump into this wild ride, let me set the stage. Family Guy has been blessing us with its chaotic humor since 1999, and over those decades, the show has accumulated more strange trivia than a conspiracy theorist's bulletin board. These aren't your typical behind-the-scenes stories about voice actors or animation techniques. No, we're talking about facts so random and unexpected that they'll have you questioning everything you thought you knew about the Griffin family and their twisted little universe. Let's start with something that'll make you see Lois Griffin in a completely different light. Did you know that if we calculated all of Lois's criminal activities throughout the series, she'd be facing multiple life sentences? I'm not talking about minor infractions here. We're discussing murder, drug manufacturing, corruption, kidnapping, and assault charges that would make even the most hardened criminals nervous. The evolution of Lois as a character is absolutely fascinating when you think about it. In the early seasons, she was essentially a generic sitcom mom, playing the straight woman to Peter's antics. But somewhere along the way, the writers decided to transform her into something far more sinister. By the later seasons, Lois had become a full-blown criminal mastermind, hiding behind the facade of suburban motherhood. Take her casual confession to vehicular manslaughter, for instance. During a seemingly innocent family moment, Lois drops the bombshell that she once killed a jaywalker years ago. The way she mentions it so nonchalantly, like she's discussing the weather, suggests this might not even be her only victim. It makes you wonder what other dark secrets are lurking behind that perfectly styled red hair. But murder is just the tip of the iceberg. Lois has also run a methamphetamine operation that would make Walter White jealous. When the Griffin family moves to a farm and discovers an abandoned meth lab in their storm cellar, most normal people would call the police immediately. Not Lois. She sees a business opportunity and jumps in with both feet, becoming a drug queenpin alongside Peter. The fact that she rationalizes this decision by saying their family needs them to sell illegal drugs to the community shows just how twisted her moral compass has become. Speaking of twisted morals, let's talk about the time Lois went through what can only be described as the world's most inappropriate midlife crisis. After Peter makes some insensitive comments about her age at her birthday party, Lois transforms into someone you might find dancing on tables at a club at 3 in the morning. This leads to her attempting to seduce a teenage pop star, which crosses so many legal and ethical boundaries that it's hard to know where to begin. The shoplifting incident is another perfect example of how quickly Lois can spiral out of control. What starts as stealing a single ham from the grocery store escalates into a full-blown crime spree involving fine art and car parts. Her kleptomania becomes so severe that she eventually gets arrested, breaks out of jail, and turns her entire family into fugitives. All because she couldn't resist the thrill of taking something that didn't belong to her. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Lois's criminal behavior is how she treats her own children when things go wrong. When Stewie suffers a serious head injury, instead of rushing him to the hospital like any normal parent would, Lois chooses to cover it up. She and Peter create an elaborate scheme involving makeup and staged accidents to hide their negligence. The fact that she prioritizes avoiding responsibility over her child's well-being reveals a level of selfishness that's genuinely chilling. Now, let's shift gears and talk about some of the more bizarre production facts that most fans don't know. The show's creator, Seth MacFarlane, originally pitched Family Guy as a much darker, more satirical series. Many of the early concepts were considered too controversial, even for late-night television. Some of these rejected ideas eventually found their way into later episodes, but in modified form. The voice acting process for Family Guy is more complex than most people realize. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple main characters, often having full conversations with himself during recording sessions. The technical challenge of maintaining distinct personalities and vocal patterns for each character while switching back and forth rapidly is something that few voice actors could handle. MacFarlane has mentioned in interviews that he sometimes loses track of which character he's supposed to be voicing mid-sentence. The show's animation style, while appearing simple on the surface, actually requires an enormous amount of detail work. Each episode contains hundreds of subtle visual gags and background jokes that most viewers miss entirely. The animators deliberately hide references to other shows, movies, and pop culture phenomena in almost every frame. Some of these hidden jokes are so obscure that they're only discovered by fans years after the episodes originally aired. One of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy's production is how the writers handle the show's timeline. The characters never age, despite the show running for over 2 decades. This creates some fascinating continuity challenges. For example, pop culture references that were current when early episodes were written now seem dated, but the characters still react to them as if they're happening in real time. The writers have to constantly balance staying relevant with maintaining the show's internal consistency. The censorship battles that Family Guy has fought over the years could fill their own documentary series. Network executives have rejected countless jokes, storylines, and visual gags for being too offensive or controversial. What's fascinating is that some of the content that was deemed unacceptable 15 years ago would probably pass without comment today, while other material that aired without issue then would never make it to broadcast now. The shifting standards of what's considered appropriate for television have forced the writers to constantly adapt their approach. Let's talk about the show's international reception, which varies wildly from country to country. In some nations, entire episodes have been banned for content that American audiences barely notice. Certain characters have been completely removed from international versions, while other episodes have been so heavily edited that they're barely recognizable. The challenge of creating content that works across different cultural contexts while maintaining the show's irreverent spirit has led to some creative solutions and some spectacular failures. The merchandise empire surrounding Family Guy is absolutely massive, but some of the products that have been created are genuinely bizarre. There have been Family Guy energy drinks, pet accessories, and even home security systems. The strangest might be the Family Guy branded medical supplies, which seems like an odd choice given the show's generally unhealthy lifestyle choices and medical mishaps. The fact that someone thought a thermometer featuring Peter Griffin was a marketable idea says something about our society that I'm not sure I want to examine too closely. Speaking of merchandise, the show's impact on internet culture cannot be overstated. Family Guy clips and memes have become a fundamental part of online humor, often taken completely out of context and used in ways the original creators never intended. Some jokes that weren't particularly funny in their original episodes have become comedy gold when isolated and shared online. The show has essentially become a meme generator, producing content that takes on a life of its own in the digital world. The guest star roster for Family Guy reads like a who's who of entertainment industry legends. What's remarkable is how many A-list celebrities have been willing to appear on a show that regularly mocks celebrity culture and Hollywood excess. Some guests have even allowed the show to create entire episodes built around making fun of their public personas. The fact that these stars are willing to be the butt of the joke shows either remarkable good humor or excellent agents who understand the value of staying relevant. But let's get back to the truly weird stuff. Did you know that the show has featured several episodes that were never supposed to air? These lost episodes contain content so strange or controversial that network executives decided they crossed lines that shouldn't be crossed. Some of these episodes have leaked online over the years, while others remain locked away in the Fox vault, possibly never to see the light of day. The existence of this hidden Family Guy content has spawned entire online communities dedicated to tracking down and sharing these forbidden episodes. The show's approach to historical events is particularly interesting. Family Guy has tackled everything from the Kennedy assassination to 9/11, often in ways that push the boundaries of good taste. What's fascinating is how the show uses humor to comment on serious subjects, while simultaneously acknowledging that some things probably shouldn't be joked about. This creates a strange tension, where the show is both deeply irreverent and oddly respectful at the same time. The technical aspects of producing Family Guy have evolved dramatically over the show's run. Early episodes were animated using traditional cell animation techniques, while later seasons rely heavily on computer-generated imagery. This transition has allowed for more complex visual effects and smoother animation, but it's also changed the fundamental look and feel of the show in subtle ways that longtime fans notice immediately. One of the most bizarre aspects of Family Guy lore involves the show's relationship with its own cancellation. The series was actually canceled twice by Fox, only to be brought back due to popular demand and strong DVD sales. This cancellation and resurrection cycle has become part of the show's mythology, with episodes regularly making jokes about their own temporary death. Few television series have turned their own mortality into a running gag quite so effectively. The scientific accuracy, or complete lack thereof, in Family Guy episodes could provide material for an entire physics course on what not to do. The show regularly features characters surviving impacts that would kill normal humans, objects behaving in ways that violate basic laws of physics, and medical situations that would be impossible in reality. While this is obviously intentional comedy, the sheer volume of scientific impossibilities in each episode is actually quite impressive from a creative standpoint. As you're drifting off to sleep tonight, consider this final thought. Family Guy has been on the air for so long that there are now adults who have never lived in a world without the Griffin family. For an entire generation, the bizarre logic of Family Guy humor has been a constant background presence in their lives. The show has shaped comedy sensibilities, influenced internet culture, and created a shared cultural language that spans multiple generations. The random facts we've explored tonight barely scratch the surface of the Family Guy universe. Behind every episode lies a web of creative decisions, production challenges, and cultural commentary that reveals far more depth than the show's crude humor might suggest. Whether you love it or hate it, Family Guy has undeniably left an indelible mark on television history and popular culture. So as you close your eyes and let sleep take over, remember that somewhere in the world, animators are working on the next batch of Family Guy episodes, creating new random facts that will someday keep future generations awake at night, wondering how on earth such a bizarre and wonderful show ever came to exist. Sweet dreams, and may your subconscious be filled with the chaotic energy of the Griffin family and their endlessly entertaining dysfunction. Hey, sleepyheads, if you're settling in for the night and need something to drift off to, you've come to the right place. Tonight we're diving into the wonderfully weird world of Family Guy, with some absolutely wild facts that'll either put you to sleep or keep you up, wondering how the heck this show got away with some of this stuff. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll have enough random Family Guy knowledge to impress literally no one at parties. But hey, that's what we're here for. Let's start with something that'll blow your mind. Did you know that Peter Griffin has technically been married to Lois longer in real time than some actual married couples have been together? The show premiered in 1999. Which means Peter and Lois have been cartoon married for over 25 years now. That's longer than a lot of Hollywood marriages last, and considering all the ridiculous stuff Peter puts Lois through, it's honestly impressive she hasn't left him for someone with at least 2 functioning brain cells. Speaking of Peter's questionable decision-making skills, here's a fact that might make you question everything you thought you knew about the show. Peter Griffin has actually cheated on Lois multiple times throughout the series, but not always in the way you'd expect. There was that whole episode where Peter literally got injected with what the doctors called a gay gene during a medical experiment. Now, I know what you're thinking, and yes, this is as ridiculous as it sounds. Peter needed money for medical bills, saw an ad for volunteers for medical research, and being Peter, he didn't ask any questions before signing up. The doctors at this research facility were apparently working on some kind of gene therapy, and Peter ended up getting injected with this experimental serum that was supposed to make him gay. The kicker? He only did it because they offered him $125. That's right, Peter Griffin's sexuality was temporarily altered, for the price of a decent vacuum cleaner. Only on Family Guy would someone's entire identity shift because of what amounts to pocket change. But here's where it gets really interesting. Once the serum kicked in, Peter didn't just become gay, he became like stereotypically gay. We're talking about a guy who suddenly knew all the best brunch spots in town and started making homemade muffins. Lois was initially upset about the whole situation until she tasted those muffins, and then she was suddenly okay with having a gay husband. It's like she discovered the secret to getting Peter to actually contribute to household duties was a medical experiment gone wrong. The really wild part is that Peter ended up getting a boyfriend named Scott, and he was completely ready to leave his entire family for this guy. Peter literally told Lois he was leaving her for his new soulmate, packed his bags, and started living his best gay life. They went to fancy restaurants, which is probably more romantic attention than Lois had gotten in years, and Peter was genuinely happy. The effects were supposed to wear off eventually, but nobody knew when. The doctor said it could be anywhere from a week to a year, which is quite possibly the most unhelpful medical diagnosis in television history. Meanwhile, Brian and Stewie decided they needed to fix this situation, so they sent Peter to what was essentially conversion therapy, which obviously didn't work. Scott got worried when Peter disappeared for 2 days and showed up at the Griffin house looking for him. When Lois found out what Brian had done, she wasn't happy, and they all rushed to rescue Peter from this ridiculous straight camp. Here's the kicker, though. When Peter and Scott were finally reunited, Scott had a special surprise planned. Remember how Peter had mentioned that his ultimate fantasy was to have an 11-way? Well, Scott made that happen. Can you imagine being in Peter's shoes when the effects finally wore off after 2.5 weeks? The man went from living his best life to probably needing serious therapy. But that wasn't even the only time Peter stepped out on his marriage. There was another incident involving his special mirrored sunglasses that accidentally revealed he was getting calls from a secret boyfriend. Peter was playing poker, and because he's Peter, he was wearing these ridiculous sunglasses that basically showed everyone his cards. But that wasn't even the stupidest part. When his phone rang during the game, everyone could see in his sunglasses that the contact was saved as his secret boyfriend. The man literally had no concept of how to keep a secret. Peter's excuse for taking the call? He told everyone it was his wife. Smooth, Peter. Real smooth. This is the same guy who somehow managed to maintain an entire second family in Chicago. That's right. Peter Griffin had a whole other life where he pretended to be the mother of someone else's children. He would tell his real family he was going on business trips, fly to Chicago, change clothes in a taxi, and then show up at this other house where a bunch of kids would greet him like he was their mom. I have so many questions about this arrangement that I don't think I want answered. Like, whose kids were those? How did this living situation even come about? And most importantly, how did Peter manage to keep this secret when he couldn't even hide a boyfriend's contact information on his phone? The man's inconsistency is honestly impressive. Then there was the time Peter got amnesia and forgot he was married to Lois entirely. This happened when the Griffin family somehow ended up on Family Feud, because of course they did. Peter got into a fight with Richard Dawson, which honestly seems about right for Peter's personality, and ended up flying headfirst into a table. The impact gave him complete amnesia, and he had no idea who Lois or his kids were. The doctor said Peter's memory could come back anywhere from days to years, which again, super helpful medical advice. Lois tried everything to jog his memory, including showing him old home movies, but Peter just got distracted by random things in the background. The man's attention span was somehow even worse with amnesia than it was normally. Here's where things got weird, though. Peter might not have remembered being married to Lois, but some things about his personality remained intact. like the fact that he was a complete pervert. He started creeping on Lois, not realizing she was actually his wife and that he could just ask her to sleep with him. When Lois explained the situation, Peter was over the moon. He basically got to lose his virginity all over again, except this time with someone who actually knew what they were doing. But Peter's amnesia brain didn't quite understand the boundaries of marriage. He seemed to think that if he could sleep with Lois, he could probably sleep with anyone in the house. This led to Lois having to explain, in the most awkward way possible, that he couldn't have relations with the kids. That's a sentence no parent should ever have to say. But then again, this is Peter Griffin we're talking about. The amnesia situation got even more complicated when Peter decided he didn't want to be married anymore. He thought the whole concept was stupid and decided to become a bachelor. So suddenly, Lois and the kids were kicked out of their own house and had to move to a crappy apartment in the city, while Peter lived it up as a single man. He was throwing parties, bringing home different women every night, and generally living like he was 25 years old instead of a middle-aged father of 3. The really messed up part is that Peter got his memory back after about a day, but he decided to keep pretending he had amnesia because he was enjoying the bachelor lifestyle too much. Meanwhile, Quagmire was making moves on Lois in her vulnerable state, and Brian had to rush to tell Peter what was happening. Peter finally confessed that his memory had returned, but only because he didn't want Quagmire sleeping with his wife. The fact that he was willing to abandon his family for random hookups but drew the line at Quagmire says a lot about Peter's priorities. One of the most bizarre cheating incidents involved Peter falling in love with a cardboard cutout. This wasn't some quick gag either. Peter literally brought home a cardboard stand-up of model Kathy Ireland and treated it like a real relationship. He introduced the cutout to his kids, took it out to dinner, and somehow managed to have what he considered a physical relationship with it. The logistics of this situation are something I don't think anyone wants to think too hard about. Peter was so committed to this cardboard romance that he told his kids Kathy was their new mom. Lois was still living in the house and honestly seemed pretty unbothered by the whole thing. She figured it would blow over eventually, and she was probably right, except that Chris decided to take Kathy into his room for his own purposes. When Peter found out, he was so angry that he shook the cutout, and her cardboard head literally fell off, ending the relationship in the most anticlimactic way possible. The show also had this meta episode where they pretended to show behind-the-scenes footage of the Family Guy cast, and in this fake documentary, we found out that Peter was supposedly cheating on Lois with an 18-year-old intern. When confronted about the naked pictures on his phone, Peter's excuse was that his phone number used to belong to the intern's ex-boyfriend, so the pictures were sent by mistake. Then, when pressed further, he claimed it was the cloud's fault. The cloud people. Peter Griffin blamed technology for his infidelity. What made this even worse was that Lois revealed this had happened 5 times, and some of the pictures actually had Peter in them too. At this point, you have to wonder about Lois's self-respect, but then again, she's been putting up with Peter's nonsense for over 2 decades, so maybe she's just developed an immunity to his stupidity. Throughout all of these incidents, there's this running theme of Peter having absolutely no understanding of how relationships work. Whether he's temporarily gay, suffering from amnesia, or falling in love with cardboard, he consistently makes choices that any reasonable person would recognize as relationship ending. Yet somehow, Lois always takes him back, and they return to their dysfunctional but apparently unbreakable marriage. The fascinating thing about Peter's various infidelities is how they reflect different aspects of his character. When he's gay, he becomes more thoughtful and domestic. When he has amnesia, his base instincts take over. When he's with the cardboard cutout, it shows his complete detachment from reality. Each scenario reveals something different about what makes Peter tick, even if none of it makes him a better husband. What's really interesting is how the show treats these situations as comedy rather than serious relationship problems. In real life, most of these incidents would result in divorce, therapy, or at minimum, some serious conversations about boundaries and commitment. But in the Family Guy universe, they're just Tuesday. Peter can maintain a secret family, inject himself with experimental drugs, or forget his wife exists entirely, and by the end of the episode, everything goes back to normal. This reflects the show's overall approach to continuity and consequences. Family Guy operates in a world where actions don't have lasting impact, where characters can experience major life changes that are completely forgotten by the next episode. It's part of what allows the show to push boundaries and explore ridiculous scenarios without worrying about long-term narrative consistency. The fact that Peter has cheated on Lois in so many different ways also highlights the show's commitment to mining comedy from uncomfortable situations. Seth MacFarlane and the writing team seem to delight in finding new ways to make Peter an even worse husband, while somehow keeping him sympathetic enough that audiences don't completely turn against him. And there you have it, folks. Peter Griffin's extensive history of marital infidelity, from gay gene experiments to cardboard cutout romances. Sweet dreams. And try not to think too hard about the logistics of any of this. If you enjoyed learning about Peter's questionable relationship choices, make sure to subscribe for more random animated facts that serve no practical purpose but might help you fall asleep. Until next time, keep it weird, keep it random, and remember that somewhere out there, Peter Griffin is probably doing something that would end most marriages but will be completely forgotten by next episode. Picture this. You're scrolling through endless YouTube videos at 2 a.m., your brain craving something familiar yet fascinating to drift off to. Well, buckle up, because I've got a treasure trove of Family Guy secrets that'll either help you sleep peacefully or keep you wide awake wondering how this animated chaos machine actually works. From behind-the-scenes drama to mind-bending production facts, these random tidbits about the Griffin family will give your brain exactly what it needs for that perfect sleepy time content. Let me start with something that'll blow your mind right off the bat. The voice of Stewie Griffin, that diabolical baby genius we all know and love, is performed by the show's creator, Seth MacFarlane himself. But here's the kicker that most people don't realize. MacFarlane originally based Stewie's voice on the legendary actor Rex Harrison, who played Professor Henry Higgins in My Fair Lady. That posh, sophisticated British accent that makes Stewie sound like he stepped out of a Victorian manor. It's basically a baby doing an impression of a 1,960 seconds Broadway star. The irony is delicious when you think about it. This character, who spends half his time plotting world domination, is essentially channeling a musical theater legend. Now, if you think that's wild, wait until you hear about the show's near-death experience that almost prevented it from becoming the cultural phenomenon we know today. Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice, by Fox. The first cancellation happened in 2002 after just 3 seasons, and for a hot minute there, it looked like the Griffin family was done for good. But then something magical happened that literally brought the show back from the dead. DVD sales and Adult Swim reruns created such a massive fan following that Fox had no choice but to resurrect it in 2005. It's like the show became a zombie that refused to stay buried, clawing its way back to life through sheer fan devotion. The creation story of Family Guy itself reads like something out of a fever dream. Seth MacFarlane was just 24 years old when he pitched the show to Fox, making him one of the youngest people ever to create and run their own animated series for a major network. He literally animated the entire pilot episode by himself, spending months hunched over a desk drawing frame after frame while surviving on probably nothing but coffee and determination. The original pitch was actually inspired by his college thesis film called The Life of Larry, which featured a middle-aged man with a talking dog. Sound familiar? That little student film eventually evolved into the multi-million-dollar empire we know today. Speaking of that talking dog, Brian Griffin holds a special place in animation history for reasons you probably never considered. Unlike most cartoon pets who remain perpetually animal-like, Brian is essentially a human character who just happens to be a dog. He drives cars, drinks martinis, writes novels, and engages in complex philosophical debates. MacFarlane has stated that Brian represents his own voice in the show more than any other character, which explains why the dog often serves as the moral compass of the family. It's basically MacFarlane having conversations with himself through a talking animal, which, when you think about it, is either brilliant or slightly concerning. The show's controversial humor didn't emerge by accident. It was a carefully calculated rebellion against traditional family sitcoms. MacFarlane deliberately set out to create the anti-Simpsons, something that would push every boundary the Simpsons wouldn't touch. Where the Simpsons used gentle satire and heartwarming family moments, Family Guy went nuclear with shock, humor, and deliberately offensive content. The cutaway gags, those random flashback sequences that became the show's signature, were originally MacFarlane's solution to a problem he had with traditional sitcom pacing. He wanted to break free from the constraints of linear storytelling and create something that felt more like channel surfing through a fever dream. Here's a production detail that'll make you appreciate the craft behind the chaos. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 10 months to complete, from initial script to final animation. That means the episodes you're watching right now were being worked on almost a year ago. The animation process alone involves hundreds of artists working across multiple studios, with the initial designs created in California before being sent overseas for full animation. It's like a massive international relay race, where each handoff has to be perfect or the whole episode falls apart. The voice acting sessions are apparently legendary affairs that sound more like comedy improv shows than traditional recording sessions. McFarlane voices not just Stewie, but also Brian, Peter, and Glenn Quagmire, often having entire conversations with himself in the recording booth. The other voice actors have described watching him switch between characters mid-sentence as both impressive and slightly unsettling. Imagine seeing someone argue with themselves in 4 different voices while maintaining perfect character consistency. It's basically like watching a one-man theater performance in real time. One of the most fascinating aspects of Family Guy's production is how the writer's room operates. Unlike many animated shows that plan seasons far in advance, Family Guy's writing process is notoriously chaotic and last-minute. Writers have described sessions where entire episodes get scrapped days before animation begins, leading to frantic rewrites and sleepless nights. This seat-of-the-pants approach actually contributes to the show's unpredictable energy, but it also means that voice actors sometimes receive new scripts literally hours before recording sessions. The show's relationship with censorship has been a constant dance between pushing boundaries and avoiding network wrath. Family Guy has developed an almost scientific approach to testing limits, deliberately writing jokes that are slightly more offensive than what they actually want to air, knowing that network censors will demand cuts. The final version that reaches viewers is often the writer's actual intended content, achieved through strategic overwriting and negotiation. It's psychological warfare disguised as comedy writing. McFarlane's musical background plays a much larger role in the show than most people realize. Before creating Family Guy, he was actually a jazz vocalist and pianist, which explains the numerous musical numbers scattered throughout episodes. Those elaborate song and dance sequences aren't just random comedy bits. They're genuine musical theater productions compressed into cartoon format. McFarlane has stated that he views Family Guy as partly a variety show, using the Griffin family as a framework to showcase different types of entertainment within each episode. The character designs themselves tell an interesting story about animation philosophy. Notice how the Griffin family members all have distinctly different body shapes and facial structures, unlike many cartoon families where everyone looks like variations of the same template. Peter's round, doughy appearance was specifically designed to contrast with Lois's sharp, angular features, while Stewie's football-shaped head was meant to make him instantly recognizable even in silhouette. These design choices weren't arbitrary. They were carefully calculated to ensure each character would be visually distinct even in crowded scenes or quick cuts. Here's something that'll change how you watch the show forever. The infamous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken weren't originally planned as recurring segments. The first chicken fight was supposed to be a one-off gag, but the animation team had so much fun creating the over-the-top action sequence that it became a running theme. Those elaborate, destruction-filled battles that seem to last forever? They're essentially the animation team showing off their action sequence skills in a comedy show, like flexing creative muscles that don't usually get exercised in traditional sitcom animation. The show's approach to celebrity guest stars is uniquely twisted compared to other animated series. While most cartoons treat celebrity appearances as special events, with the famous person playing themselves or a character clearly meant to be them, Family Guy often buries celebrity voices in minor roles without any fanfare. A-list actors will voice background characters for single lines, and viewers might never realize they just heard a famous person deliver a throwaway joke. It's the entertainment industry equivalent of hiding expensive ingredients in cheap fast food. Family Guy's international versions reveal fascinating cultural differences in humor. In some countries, entire episodes have been rewritten because the original jokes simply don't translate, not just linguistically, but culturally. What Americans find hilarious might be completely incomprehensible to audiences in other parts of the world, leading to localized versions that are essentially different shows with the same characters. It's like each country gets its own flavor of the Griffin family chaos, tailored to local sensibilities. The merchandising empire built around Family Guy extends into some surprisingly niche markets. Beyond the obvious t-shirts and DVDs, there are Family Guy-themed wine collections, luxury watches, and even high-end collectible sculptures that cost thousands of dollars. The show that built its reputation on lowbrow humor has somehow spawned upscale merchandise that wouldn't look out of place in expensive boutiques. It's cultural cognitive dissonance at its finest. The writing staff includes people from incredibly diverse backgrounds: former stand-up comedians, Harvard graduates, television veterans, and complete newcomers to the industry. This mix creates a unique creative environment where highbrow intellectual humor crashes into street-level comedy instincts. The result is a show that can reference obscure philosophical concepts in one scene and make fart jokes in the next, often within the same episode. Animation errors in Family Guy have become something of a cult fascination among fans. Unlike other shows that try to hide mistakes, Family Guy occasionally leaves obvious animation goofs in the final product, either intentionally, as Easter eggs, or because the production schedule doesn't allow for fixes. These errors have spawned online communities dedicated to spotting and cataloging every miscolored character, floating object, or impossible perspective. It's accidental, interactive entertainment, where viewers become detectives hunting for visual inconsistencies. The show's theme song, that bouncy piano melody everyone knows by heart, was originally much longer and included additional verses that were cut for time. The full version tells a more complete story about the Griffin family's dynamics, but network television's rigid timing requirements forced it down to the bare essentials. MacFarlane has occasionally performed the complete version at live concerts, giving fans a glimpse of what could have been the opening sequence if television had more flexible formatting. Voice acting for animated shows requires a completely different skill set than live-action performance, and Family Guy pushes these demands to extremes. The actors often need to deliver lines while laughing, crying, or even while their characters are supposed to be eating, fighting, or running. This means recording sessions frequently involve voice actors doing physical comedy performances in sound booths, acting out entire scenes with just their voices, while making exaggerated facial expressions that no one will ever see, but that somehow make the vocal performance more authentic. The show's relationship with current events creates unique production challenges. Because episodes take months to complete, jokes about contemporary issues often feel dated by the time they air, leading to a complex balancing act between topical relevance and timeless humor. Writers have developed strategies for creating content that feels current without being tied to specific news cycles, though sometimes they get caught off guard when major events happen during production and their carefully planned episodes suddenly seem tone-deaf or prescient in ways they never intended. Family Guy's influence on internet culture extends far beyond just memes and viral videos. The show's cutaway gag structure essentially predicted how people would consume media in the social media age. Short, disconnected bursts of content that don't require following a linear narrative. Those seemingly random flashbacks that interrupt the main story? They're basically the television equivalent of scrolling through TikTok or Twitter, jumping from one unrelated thought to another without warning. The economics behind Family Guy reveal interesting insights into how modern television actually works. Despite being an animated show with relatively high production costs, it's incredibly profitable because animated content doesn't age the same way live-action shows do. There are no aging actors demanding higher salaries, no physical sets that deteriorate, and no location shoots that become impossible due to changing landscapes. The Griffin family can theoretically exist forever without any of the logistical problems that eventually kill most television series. Behind all the controversy and chaos, Family Guy operates like a massive creative experiment in pushing the boundaries of what television can be. Every episode is essentially asking the question, what if we tried this completely ridiculous thing and somehow made it work within the framework of a family sitcom? Sometimes the experiments fail spectacularly, but when they succeed, they create moments of television that are genuinely unlike anything else on the air. The show has created its own internal mythology that's become increasingly complex over the years. Character relationships, running gags, and callback references have built up layers of continuity that reward longtime viewers while potentially confusing newcomers. It's like a secret club where the membership requirement is having watched hundreds of hours of animated chaos, and the reward is understanding jokes that are incomprehensible to everyone else. And here's perhaps the most interesting fact about Family Guy. Despite all its success and cultural impact, the show remains fundamentally unpredictable. After more than 2 decades on the air, it can still surprise viewers with completely unexpected creative choices, bizarre guest appearances, or experimental episodes that break its own established rules. In a television landscape increasingly dominated by formulaic content, Family Guy maintains a chaotic creativity that keeps audiences guessing what might happen next. So there you have it, a deep dive into the wonderfully weird world behind one of television's most controversial animated families. Whether you're drifting off to sleep or staying wide awake in fascination, these facts reveal just how much complexity hides behind what appears to be simple cartoon chaos. Sweet dreams, and remember, in the Griffin household, normal is just another word for boring. Picture this: you're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone, and your brain is buzzing with the day's chaos. You need something familiar, something comforting, something that'll help you drift off into peaceful sleep. Well, tonight we're diving into the wonderfully weird world of Quahog with some random Family Guy facts that'll ease you into dreamland. So grab your favorite pillow, get cozy, and let me tell you some fascinating tidbits about America's most dysfunctional animated family that might just surprise you. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice? The show first got the axe in 2002 after just 3 seasons. Fox executives thought the ratings weren't strong enough to justify keeping it alive. But here's where it gets interesting. The show found new life through DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim. The DVD sales were so phenomenal that they broke records for animated series at the time. Fans were buying up seasons faster than Peter could down a beer at the Drunken Clam. This unprecedented demand from home video sales convinced Fox to bring the show back in 2005, making it one of the first series ever to be resurrected primarily due to DVD performance. The voice behind Peter Griffin, Seth MacFarlane, actually does most of his recording sessions incredibly quickly. While many voice actors take hours to perfect their performances, MacFarlane can knock out an entire episode's worth of dialogue in about 2 hours. That's pretty impressive when you consider he voices not just Peter, but also Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire. His rapid recording style comes from his background in radio, where timing and efficiency were absolutely crucial. MacFarlane developed his distinctive character voices during his college years at the Rhode Island School of Design, where he actually created an early version of Family Guy as his senior thesis project. Speaking of voices, here's something that might keep you pondering as you fall asleep. Stewie's accent isn't actually British. Seth MacFarlane has explained that Stewie's voice is meant to be a sort of generic upper-class accent that could come from anywhere. It's a theatrical, affected way of speaking that's supposed to make Stewie sound sophisticated and pretentious, regardless of geographic origin. The inspiration came from old Hollywood actors and theater performers who adopted similar speech patterns to sound more refined. The character of Glenn Quagmire has one of the most disturbing backstories in animated television, though it's mostly revealed through throwaway gags and quick references. His middle name is apparently Quentin, and he's supposedly been a pilot since the 1960 seconds, which would make him significantly older than he appears. The show has hinted that he's been involved in various historical events, always in morally questionable ways. His famous catchphrase, "giggity," wasn't actually in the original character design. It evolved naturally during Seth MacFarlane's recording sessions and became so popular with the writers that they started incorporating it into more and more episodes. Here's a fact that might make you appreciate the show's attention to detail. The Griffin family's house layout is incredibly consistent throughout the series. The writers and animators keep detailed floor plans to ensure that rooms connect properly from episode to episode. This level of continuity is actually quite rare in animated sitcoms, where houses often seem to have magical expanding and contracting rooms depending on what the plot needs. The Griffin house is based on an actual home in Cranston, Rhode Island, though it's been modified significantly for animation purposes. Brian's character has evolved dramatically since the show's early days. Originally, he was written as more of a straight man to Peter's antics, serving as the voice of reason in the household. However, as the series progressed, the writers began exploring Brian's flaws more deeply. His pretentiousness, his drinking problem, his romantic failures, and his writing aspirations all became major character traits. This evolution reflects Seth MacFarlane's own growth as a writer and his willingness to make his characters more complex and sometimes less likable. The show's cultural impact extends far beyond television screens. Family Guy has influenced internet meme culture in ways that few other shows can claim. The Roadhouse cutaway gag became a popular meme format years before most people even knew what memes were. The "oh no" moments, the chicken fights, and countless other Family Guy references have become part of online vernacular. This digital footprint has helped keep the show relevant with younger audiences who might discover it through social media rather than traditional television viewing. One of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy's production is how cutaway gags are created. The writers have a separate room where they brainstorm completely random, unrelated jokes that can be inserted into episodes when needed. These gags are often written months before they're actually used, and they're stored in a database that writers can search through when they need to fill time or add comedy to a scene. This system allows for the show's signature non-sequitur humor, while maintaining a consistent production schedule. The character of Meg has been voiced by two different actors, though most viewers probably never noticed the change. Lacey Chabert voiced Meg during the first season, but Mila Kunis took over starting in season 2. The transition was so seamless that it barely registered with audiences. Mila Kunis has mentioned in interviews that she initially tried to match Lacey Chabert's interpretation of the character, but eventually developed her own approach. Interestingly, Kunis was also voicing Jackie Burkhardt on That 70 Seconds show at the same time, showcasing her range as a voice actor. Family Guy's relationship with censorship has been fascinating to observe over the years. The show has pushed boundaries consistently, sometimes getting away with content that surprises even longtime viewers. However, there are also episodes that have been banned or heavily edited for various reasons. The censorship battles have actually become part of the show's identity, with Seth MacFarlane and the writers often incorporating discussions about censorship directly into episodes. The show's approach to celebrity guest stars is uniquely irreverent. Unlike many animated series that treat celebrity appearances as special events, Family Guy often has famous people, voice characters, who are immediately killed off or humiliated in some way. This approach reflects the show's general irreverence towards celebrity culture and its willingness to bite the hand that feeds it. Many celebrities have appeared on the show specifically because they wanted to be made fun of, which says something interesting about the show's cultural position. Here's something that might surprise you. Family Guy has actually won several Emmy nominations and awards over the years. While it's often dismissed as lowbrow humor, the show has been recognized for its voice acting, animation, and music. Seth MacFarlane's musical numbers, in particular, have received critical acclaim. His background in musical theater shows through in episodes featuring elaborate song and dance sequences, which often rival those found in major animated films. The show's international versions are fascinating studies in cultural adaptation. Different countries have had to handle the show's content in various ways, sometimes changing jokes entirely to make them relevant to local audiences. In some cases, entire episodes have been restructured because certain references or situations don't translate across cultural boundaries. These international versions offer interesting insights into how humor travels, or doesn't travel, across different societies. Family Guy's merchandise empire is surprisingly extensive and eclectic. Beyond the typical t-shirts and action figures, there have been Family Guy board games, cookbooks, and even meditation guides. The show's merchandising success demonstrates how deeply it has penetrated popular culture. Fans don't just watch Family Guy, they incorporate it into various aspects of their lives through products that extend the show's universe into the real world. The writing process for Family Guy involves what the staff calls manatee balls, a reference to a South Park episode that made fun of Family Guy's writing style. The writers actually embraced this criticism and lean into the randomness that South Park was mocking. They've developed systems for generating increasingly absurd combinations of references, situations, and characters. This self-aware approach to their own writing style has become part of the show's meta-humor. Seth MacFarlane's other projects have often served as testing grounds for Family Guy concepts. The Orville, his science fiction series, actually uses some of the same character dynamics and humor styles that he developed for Family Guy, just in a different setting. Similarly, American Dad and The Cleveland Show served as laboratories where different aspects of the Family Guy formula could be explored and refined. The show's relationship with current events is complex and ever-evolving. Family Guy often references things that happened months before episodes air due to production schedules, but the writers have developed techniques for keeping the show feeling current. They've also mastered the art of making jokes that feel timeless, even when they're about very specific cultural moments. One aspect of Family Guy that often goes unnoticed is its sophisticated understanding of animation history. The show regularly pays homage to classic animation styles, from Disney to Warner Brothers to obscure experimental films. These references serve multiple purposes. They demonstrate the creator's deep knowledge of their medium. They provide visual variety, and they create inside jokes for animation enthusiasts. The show's impact on other animated series cannot be overstated. Family Guy's success opened doors for more adult-oriented animated programming and influenced the humor styles of countless other shows. Its willingness to break the fourth wall, its pop culture reference density, and its approach to controversial topics have all been adopted and adapted by other animated series. As you drift off to sleep, consider this. Family Guy represents a unique moment in television history, where traditional broadcast standards, internet culture, and animation technology all converged to create something entirely new. The show emerged just as DVD sales were becoming important, just as internet memes were developing, and just as animation technology was becoming sophisticated enough to support rapid production schedules. The voice actors have developed such strong relationships with their characters that they often improvise during recording sessions. These improvisations frequently make it into the final episodes, adding spontaneity to what could otherwise be very controlled animation. The chemistry between voice actors, even when they're recording separately, comes through in the final product in ways that feel natural and unforced. Family Guy's legacy will likely be its demonstration that animated television could be both commercially successful and artistically ambitious while maintaining an irreverent, anti-establishment attitude. It proved that audiences were hungry for content that didn't talk down to them, that referenced the full spectrum of popular culture, and that wasn't afraid to offend or surprise. So as you close your eyes tonight, remember that somewhere in the world, someone is discovering Family Guy for the first time. Someone else is rewatching their favorite episode, and the creators are probably working on new ways to surprise, shock, and entertain audiences. In the grand tradition of animated comedy, Family Guy continues to push boundaries, challenge expectations, and remind us that sometimes the most comforting thing about entertainment is its complete unpredictability. Sweet dreams, and remember, tomorrow is another day in Quahog, where anything can happen, and usually does. You know that feeling when you're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone at 2 in the morning, and you just need something to help your brain wind down? Well, tonight we're diving into the wonderfully weird world of Family Guy with some absolutely random facts that'll either put you to sleep or keep you up wondering how Seth MacFarlane's mind actually works. So grab your pillow, get comfortable, and let's explore the bizarre universe of Quahog together. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice? The show first got the axe in 2002 after just 3 seasons, but something incredible happened that brought it back from the dead. Adult Swim started airing reruns, and the show's popularity exploded like Peter Griffin trying to open a jar of pickles. The DVD sales went through the roof, and suddenly Fox realized they'd made a massive mistake. So in 2005, Family Guy came back from cancellation, making it one of the very few shows in television history to pull off this resurrection trick twice. Speaking of resurrections, here's something that might surprise you about Brian Griffin's voice. Seth MacFarlane, who voices the intellectual dog, actually based Brian's sophisticated accent and mannerisms on his own personality. MacFarlane has said in interviews that Brian is essentially his voice in the show, which explains why the dog often serves as the voice of reason, at least when he's not having his own ridiculous adventures. It's almost like MacFarlane created his own animated alter ego to comment on the chaos around him. Now here's a fact that'll make you appreciate the show's attention to detail, even in its most absurd moments. The Griffin family's address is 31 Spooner Street, and this isn't just a random number pulled out of thin air. The address is actually a reference to the street where one of the show's early writers lived. But what's even more interesting is that if you look carefully at episodes throughout the series, you'll notice that the layout of the Griffin house has changed multiple times. Sometimes there are different numbers of windows, the staircase moves around, and rooms appear and disappear like they're in some kind of cartoon physics experiment. Let's talk about Stewie Griffin for a moment. because this character has one of the most fascinating evolution arcs in animated television. In the early seasons, Stewie was genuinely diabolical, plotting to kill his mother Lois and take over the world with elaborate schemes that would make a Bond villain jealous. But as the series progressed, the writers gradually shifted his character from evil mastermind to sophisticated, cultured, and eventually openly exploring his sexuality. Seth MacFarlane has mentioned that this evolution happened naturally as they discovered what made the character funnier and more relatable. Here's something that might blow your mind about the show's production process. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 10 months to complete, from start to finish. That means when you're watching a new episode, the writers were working on it almost a year ago. This lengthy production timeline is part of why the show sometimes feels like it's commenting on events that happened ages ago, but it also explains the incredible attention to detail in the animation and voice work. Did you know that the famous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken weren't originally planned to become a recurring gag? The first chicken fight appeared in a Season 1 episode as a quick throwaway joke, but it became so popular with fans that the writers kept bringing it back, each time making the fights longer and more elaborate. These sequences have become some of the most expensive and time-consuming parts of the show to animate, sometimes taking up several minutes of screen time with incredibly detailed action sequences. Speaking of expensive sequences, the show's cutaway gags, those random flashbacks that interrupt the main story, were actually inspired by classic comedy shows like The Carol Burnett Show. Seth MacFarlane wanted to recreate that feeling of sketches within a larger show, but he took it to the extreme by making the cutaways completely disconnected from the main plot. Some of these gags have become so iconic that they've spawned their own merchandise and internet memes. Here's a heartwarming fact about the show's impact on real families. Despite all the dysfunction and chaos of the Griffin family, many real families have said that watching Family Guy together has actually brought them closer. There's something about laughing at Peter's ridiculous antics that makes your own family's problems seem manageable in comparison. The show has become a bonding experience for parents and older children who can appreciate the humor together. Let's dive into some voice acting trivia that'll make you listen to the characters differently. Mila Kunis, who voices Meg Griffin, was only 14 years old when she started on the show. She actually lied about her age during the audition process. And by the time the producers found out how young she really was, they were so impressed with her work that they kept her on. She's been voicing Meg for over 20 years now, which means she's literally grown up with the character. Here's something interesting about the show's relationship with censorship. While Family Guy pushes boundaries constantly, there are actually several episodes that have never aired on television due to content issues. These episodes exist in various forms, sometimes appearing on DVD releases or streaming platforms with heavy warnings. The writers often create content knowing it might be too controversial for broadcast, almost as a creative challenge to see how far they can push the envelope. The character of Cleveland Brown was so popular that he got his own spin-off show, but here's something you might not know about that decision. The Cleveland show was partly created because Mike Henry, who voices Cleveland, wanted to explore what it would be like to have an animated show centered around an African-American family. While the spin-off only lasted 4 seasons, it allowed the writers to tackle different types of stories and social issues than they could in Family Guy. Did you know that several major celebrities have turned down guest appearances on Family Guy because they felt the show was too controversial? But for every celebrity who said no, there were dozens who said yes, often because they were fans of the show themselves. Some of the most surprising guest stars have been people you'd never expect to appear on an adult animated comedy, including several politicians and news anchors who were willing to make fun of themselves. Here's a production fact that shows how much work goes into creating the show's signature style. The animators use a specific color palette that's deliberately muted compared to other animated shows. This choice was made to give Family Guy a slightly more realistic feel, even though the content is completely absurd. The character designs are also intentionally simple, which allows the animators to focus on facial expressions and body language that enhance the comedy. Let's talk about the show's impact on internet culture. Family Guy was one of the first television shows to really embrace social media and online fan communities. The writers regularly read fan feedback and sometimes incorporate popular fan theories or suggestions into actual episodes. This interaction between creators and fans was revolutionary for television at the time and has influenced how many other shows approach their online presence. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's educational value. Despite its reputation for crude humor, Family Guy has actually introduced many viewers to classical music, literature, and historical references they might never have encountered otherwise. The show's cutaway gags often reference everything from Shakespeare to classical composers, and many fans have said they discovered new interests because of jokes they didn't initially understand. The relationship between Family Guy and The Simpsons has always been interesting, especially since both shows air on the same network. There have been several crossover episodes and references between the shows, but there's also been some friendly rivalry. Seth MacFarlane has always acknowledged The Simpsons as a major influence, but he's also tried to carve out a distinct identity for Family Guy that sets it apart from Matt Groening's creation. Here's a fact about the show's international reach that might surprise you. Family Guy has been translated into dozens of languages and adapted for different cultures around the world. In some countries, certain jokes have to be completely rewritten because the original references don't translate culturally. This has led to some interesting variations where different versions of the same episode can have completely different gags while maintaining the same basic story structure. Did you know that several episodes of Family Guy have been turned into stage productions? There have been live performances of selected episodes at various comedy festivals, with voice actors performing their roles on stage while animation plays in the background. These performances have given fans a unique way to experience the show and have shown how well the writing works, even without the visual component. The show's theme song, which seems simple enough, actually went through multiple versions before the creators settled on the current one. The original pilot had a completely different opening sequence, and there have been several special versions created for holiday episodes and milestone celebrations. The song has become so iconic that it's been covered by numerous bands and has appeared in various other media as a cultural reference. Point. Here's something about the writing process that shows how collaborative the show really is. While Seth MacFarlane created the show and voices several main characters, the writing staff includes dozens of people who contribute jokes, storylines, and character development. Some of the funniest gags in the show come from writers who might never be credited on screen, but whose contributions are essential to the show's success. Let's talk about how Family Guy handles continuity, or rather, how it completely ignores it when convenient. Characters die and come back to life. Relationships change from episode to episode, and major life events are forgotten or contradicted regularly. This approach to storytelling was initially criticized by some viewers who expected more consistency, but it's actually become one of the show's defining characteristics, allowing for maximum creative freedom. The merchandising empire built around Family Guy is absolutely massive, including everything from action figures to clothing to home decor items featuring the characters. But here's something interesting. Some of the most popular merchandise features quotes and images from the most controversial episodes, suggesting that fans embrace the show's boundary-pushing content rather than shy away from it. Finally, here's a fact that brings us full circle to why Family Guy works so well as late-night viewing. The show's creators have always understood that comedy is often about timing and rhythm, and they've structured episodes to have natural peaks and valleys of energy. This makes it perfect for falling asleep to, because your brain can follow the familiar patterns even as you drift off, and the comfort of recognizing character voices and running gags creates a soothing background that helps many people relax. As you settle in for sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in the world, there are animators working on new Family Guy episodes that won't air for almost a year, writers brainstorming increasingly ridiculous scenarios for Peter to stumble into, and voice actors bringing these beloved characters to life. The world of Quahog continues to evolve and surprise us, proving that even after more than 20 years, there are still new stories to tell and new ways to make us laugh at the beautiful absurdity of it all. Sweet dreams. And may your subconscious be filled with talking dogs, evil babies, and the gentle chaos of the Griffin family household. Hey there, night owls and Family Guy fanatics. Before you drift off to dreamland, let me take you on a journey through the twisted world of Quahog and its unforgettable residents. Tonight we're diving deep into the most beloved and despised characters from Seth MacFarlane's animated masterpiece. So grab your favorite pillow, get comfortable, and let's explore the wild personalities that have kept us laughing and cringing for over 2 decades. Picture this: a small Rhode Island town where a talking baby plots world domination. A paralyzed cop remains the voice of reason, and a dog walks upright while nursing his literary pretensions. This is the bizarre universe of Family Guy, where moral compasses spin wildly and character development takes unexpected turns. Some residents of Quahog have captured our hearts with their quirky charm, while others have become the targets of fan frustration and outright hatred. What makes a Family Guy character lovable versus loathsome? Is it their moral fiber, their comedic timing, or simply how much chaos they create? As we journey through this character analysis, you'll discover why certain personalities have endured as fan favorites, while others have fallen from grace, becoming symbols of everything wrong with the show's direction. Let's begin our exploration with Joe Swanson, a character who stands out like a beacon of decency in an ocean of dysfunction. In a show filled with morally questionable individuals, Joe represents something genuinely admirable. Despite being confined to a wheelchair, he never allows his disability to define his worth or limit his capabilities as a police officer. His determination and positive attitude shine through even in the darkest episodes. What makes Joe so endearing is his refusal to play the victim. Instead of wallowing in self-pity, he embraces his condition with humor and grace. The self-deprecating jokes about his wheelchair become running gags that work precisely because Joe himself doesn't view his disability as a weakness. He's shown time and again that physical limitations cannot diminish his strength, courage, or effectiveness as both an officer and a friend. Remember that powerful episode where Joe temporarily regained the use of his legs? The transformation was startling. Power corrupted him almost instantly, turning our beloved reasonable Joe into an insufferable, cocky version of himself. It took his friends literally breaking his legs again to restore the Joe we knew and loved. This storyline brilliantly demonstrated that Joe's wheelchair wasn't a limitation, but rather an integral part of what made him special. Joe's genuine kindness shines through in his interactions with others, particularly in how he handles Meg's crush on him. Rather than humiliating her or making the situation awkward, he lets her down gently, showing the consideration and maturity that separates him from his less evolved friends. His relationship with Bonnie may have its challenges, but Joe consistently approaches their problems with patience and understanding. The contrast becomes stark when we examine Chris Griffin, who represents the opposite end of the likability spectrum. Chris has undergone one of the most disappointing character transformations in the series. What began as an awkward but relatably sweet teenager has devolved into something far more disturbing. His evolution from lovable oddball to creepy, perverted dunce has left many fans wondering what happened to the Chris they once enjoyed. Early Chris possessed an innocent goofiness that made his mistakes forgivable. He was weird, sure, but in an endearing way that reminded viewers of their own awkward teenage years. However, as seasons progressed, the writers seemed to drain all charm from his character, replacing it with increasingly disturbing behavior patterns that mirror his father's worst traits without any of the redeeming humor. The breaking point for many fans came during this episode where Chris's response to bullying involved kidnapping Stewie and locking him in a backpack. This wasn't just stupid or misguided. It revealed a genuinely sociopathic streak that made him irredeemably unlikable. His willingness to exploit and harm others for personal gain became a recurring theme that alienated viewers who had once rooted for him. Chris's artistic talents offered glimpses of potential depth, but the writers consistently chose to ignore these opportunities in favor of cheap, gross-out humor. Instead of developing his creative side, they reduced him to a walking masturbation joke, with no growth, no development, and no apparent purpose beyond making audiences uncomfortable. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, we find Adam West, the delightfully unhinged mayor of Quahog. West represents everything wonderful about Family Guy's absurdist humor. His complete disconnection from reality, combined with his earnest delivery of utterly ridiculous statements, creates comedy gold that never feels forced or artificial. What makes Mayor West so beloved is his authentic insanity. Unlike other characters whose crazy behavior feels calculated or mean-spirited, West's lunacy comes from a place of genuine confusion about how the world works. His attempts to gain superpowers by visiting toxic waste dumps or his confusion about basic concepts like public transportation create moments of pure comedic brilliance. The beauty of Adam West lies in his unpredictability. You never know what bizarre tangent his mind will take next, but you can be certain it will be hilarious. His complete lack of self-awareness, combined with his position of authority, creates endless opportunities for absurd situations that showcase the show's willingness to embrace complete nonsense in service of comedy. West's corruption stems not from malice or greed, but from his fundamental inability to understand basic concepts. This makes him simultaneously dangerous and endearing, a combination that few characters can pull off successfully. His random policy decisions and bizarre public appearances never fail to entertain, making him a consistent bright spot in the series. Bonnie Swanson presents a more complex case study in character likability. While Joe represents the best of humanity despite his physical challenges, Bonnie embodies frustration and resentment that many viewers find insufferable. Her constant complaints about her marriage feel particularly grating given her apparent unwillingness to actually address her supposed problems. Bonnie's role as the perpetual martyr becomes tiresome quickly. She acts as though caring for Joe is some unbearable burden, despite the fact that their relationship appears mutually beneficial. Her dependency on him contradicts her complaints about him, creating a character who seems more interested in generating sympathy than actually improving her situation. Her parenting, or lack thereof, presents another source of frustration. Bonnie shows minimal interest in her children, appearing detached and disengaged from their lives. This emotional distance, combined with her holier-than-thou attitude, creates a character who feels hypocritical and unlikable. Her affair with Brian further emphasizes her lack of respect for Joe, despite his obvious devotion to their family. The contrast between Bonnie and Joe highlights why Joe remains beloved, while Bonnie generates irritation. Joe faces genuine challenges with grace and humor, while Bonnie creates drama from relatively minor inconveniences. Her constant negativity and victim mentality make her one of the show's least sympathetic characters. Meg Griffin occupies a unique position in the Family Guy universe as the ultimate underdog. Her status as the family scapegoat has created an interesting dynamic where her suffering becomes a source of both comedy and sympathy. Many fans find themselves rooting for Meg precisely because she endures so much abuse from those around her. What makes Meg's character work is the exaggerated nature of her mistreatment. The abuse is so over-the-top and ridiculous that it loops back into comedy territory. Her family's treatment of her is so absurdly unfair that it becomes funny rather than genuinely disturbing. This delicate balance allows viewers to laugh at her situation while still feeling sympathy for her plight. Meg's occasional moments of strength and rebellion provide satisfying payoffs for viewers who have watched her suffer. When she finally stands up to her family or demonstrates hidden talents, these scenes feel earned and gratifying. Her brief stint in prison, where she became tough and confident, showed glimpses of what she could be if freed from her family's oppression. The character's potential remains largely untapped, which adds to her appeal. Meg possesses intelligence, artistic ability, and hidden depths that rarely get explored. This untapped potential makes her feel more human and relatable than many of her more cartoonish family members. Her moments of genuine emotion and vulnerability create connections with viewers who see themselves in her struggles. Doug represents everything wrong with Family Guy's approach to rivalry characters. Introduced as Stewie's nemesis, Doug never lived up to his intended role as a worthy adversary. Instead, he became a repetitive annoyance that frustrated both Stewie and the audience. His upper-class smugness and apparent invincibility made him feel like a cheap plot device rather than a genuine character. The fundamental problem with Doug was his lack of interesting qualities. He wasn't clever enough to match Stewie intellectually, funny enough to be entertaining, or threatening enough to feel dangerous. He was simply there, taking up screen time that could have been better used developing existing characters or introducing more compelling new ones. Stewie's inability to defeat Doug felt wrong for his character. The genius baby who builds time machines and death rays should not be consistently outsmarted by a slightly privileged toddler. This dynamic undermined Stewie's established competence and made their conflicts feel artificial and frustrating. The writer's decision to unceremoniously kill Doug off-screen felt like an admission of failure. Rather than providing closure to his storylines or giving him a memorable exit, they simply erased him from the show, leaving viewers with no payoff for the time they had invested in his conflicts with Stewie. Carter Pewterschmidt succeeds where Doug fails by embracing his role as an entertaining antagonist. As Lois's father and Peter's nemesis, Carter embodies every negative stereotype about wealthy elites while remaining genuinely funny. His complete disconnection from normal life, combined with his ruthless business practices, creates a character who is simultaneously despicable and hilarious. Carter's disdain for Peter provides some of the show's best ongoing comedy. His barely concealed contempt for his son-in-law, combined with his obvious belief that Lois deserves better, creates tension that translates into laughs. The fact that he's not entirely wrong about Peter's shortcomings adds depth to their antagonistic relationship. What makes Carter entertaining, rather than annoying, is his honesty about his awfulness. He never pretends to be a good person or tries to justify his selfish behavior. His brutal honesty about his motivations and his complete lack of self-awareness create comedy that feels authentic to his character. He knows exactly what he likes and uses his wealth to get it. Consequences be damned. Carter's capitalism, taken to absurd extremes, provides commentary on wealth inequality while remaining funny. His casual dismissal of poor people's problems and his genuine confusion about how normal people live create moments that are both satirical and comedic. He represents everything wrong with the ultra-wealthy, while being entertaining enough that viewers enjoy watching him. Herbert the Pervert represents one of Family Guy's most controversial characters. While some viewers find his antics mildly amusing, many fans consider him genuinely disturbing rather than funny. His entire character revolves around inappropriate behavior toward children, which crosses lines that many viewers find uncomfortable. The problem with Herbert lies in his one-note nature. Unlike other problematic characters who possess redeeming qualities or interesting depths, Herbert exists solely to make inappropriate jokes about children. This limited scope makes him feel more like a running gag that has overstayed its welcome rather than a fully developed character. Herbert's voice and mannerisms, while distinctive, quickly become grating rather than endearing. His appearances often feel forced, as though the writers are including him simply because he exists rather than because he serves any narrative purpose. This makes his scenes feel like interruptions rather than integral parts of episodes. The character's uncomfortable implications make many viewers question whether his inclusion is worth the potential laughs. While Family Guy has always pushed boundaries, Herbert's particular brand of humor feels more creepy than clever, leading many fans to wish he would simply disappear from the show entirely. Quagmire presents one of the most complex cases in Family Guy character analysis. His status as a perverted neighbor should make him completely unlikable, yet he maintains a dedicated fan base who appreciate his role in the show's dynamic. His relationships with women are deeply problematic, but his character possesses enough depth and humor to keep many viewers entertained. What saves Quagmire from complete condemnation is his occasional display of genuine care and loyalty. His protection of his sister Brenda and his willingness to stand up to her abusive boyfriend showed a side of him that transcended his usual selfish behavior. These moments of heroism provide glimpses of decency beneath his problematic exterior. Quagmire's rivalry with Brian offers some of the series' most memorable confrontations. His brutal takedown of Brian's hypocrisy during their dinner argument became an instant classic moment that many fans still quote. His ability to see through Brian's pretentious facade and call him out directly resonated with viewers who had grown tired of Brian's self-righteousness. The character's backstory adds layers that make him more than just a one-dimensional pervert. His complicated relationship with his father Ida and his genuine care for his cats reveal aspects of his personality that contradict his surface-level characterization. These contradictions make him feel more human and complex than many other characters. Brian Griffin represents perhaps the most dramatic fall from grace in Family Guy history. Once beloved as the voice of reason and moral center of the Griffin family, Brian has transformed into one of the show's most insufferable characters. His evolution from lovable family pet to pretentious hypocrite has alienated many longtime fans. Early Brian possessed integrity and intelligence that made him a compelling character. His refusal to cheat on exams and his genuine concern for his family's well-being established him as someone worth rooting for. However, as seasons progressed, his worst traits became more pronounced, while his positive qualities faded into memory. Brian's literary pretensions have become a source of endless frustration for viewers. His constant references to his unfinished novel and his pseudo-intellectual posturing feel tired and repetitive. His tendency to break up with women for being smarter than him reveals the shallow nature of his supposed intellectualism. The character's selfishness has reached levels that make him genuinely unlikable. His refusal to wear a flea collar despite infesting his entire family, his exploitation of Stewie's kindness, and his terrible treatment of his son Dylan paint a picture of someone who cares only about himself. His death and subsequent resurrection felt like missed opportunities to either give him meaningful character growth or replace him permanently. Brian's romantic relationships showcase his hypocrisy most clearly. He complains about only dating unintelligent women while actively seeking out such relationships. His inability to maintain connections with educated, accomplished women reveals his own insecurities and shallow nature. His treatment of women ranges from dismissive to actively harmful. Stewie Griffin stands as Family Guy's greatest character success story. His evolution from one-dimensional evil baby to complex, witty, and emotionally engaging character represents the best of what the show can achieve when it focuses on character development. His journey from would-be world conqueror to beloved family member has been genuinely compelling to watch. What makes Stewie so endearing is his combination of childish wonder and adult sophistication. His advanced vocabulary and complex schemes contrast beautifully with his genuine need for love and acceptance. This duality creates comedy that feels both intelligent and heartfelt, a rare combination in the Family Guy universe. Stewie's relationship with Brian, despite Brian's recent character deterioration, has provided some of the series' most memorable and touching moments. Their adventures together showcase both characters at their best, with Stewie's loyalty and Brian's companionship creating genuine emotional connections. Stewie's efforts to save Brian's life demonstrated the depth of their bond. The character's growth from villain to anti-hero to beloved family member has felt natural and earned. His evil schemes have become more playful than threatening, while his capacity for kindness and loyalty has expanded. His interactions with Rupert reveal his childlike side, while his inventions showcase his genius-level intellect. Stewie's humor has evolved to become more sophisticated and character-driven, rather than relying solely on shock value. His sarcastic observations and witty comebacks feel authentic to his personality while providing consistent laughs. His ability to break the fourth wall and comment on the show itself adds meta-humor that longtime fans appreciate. Lois Griffin presents a fascinating case study in character likability, or rather, the lack thereof. While she appears to be the moral center of the Griffin family, closer examination reveals her to be just as flawed and problematic as the relatives she criticizes. Her hypocrisy and manipulative behavior have made her increasingly unpopular with fans over time. Lois's biggest problem is her tendency to present herself as morally superior while engaging in behavior that contradicts her stated values. She criticizes others for infidelity while having multiple affairs. Herself, she plays the concerned mother while neglecting her children's actual needs. This disconnect between her self-image and her actions creates a character who feels dishonest and frustrating. Her treatment of Meg represents some of her worst behavior. While Peter's abuse of Meg is overt and cartoonish, Lois's neglect and emotional manipulation feel more realistic and therefore more disturbing. Her tendency to gaslight Meg and play the victim when confronted about her parenting failures reveals a calculating side to her personality. Lois's violent tendencies, particularly after learning martial arts, showcase her capacity for genuine cruelty. Her attacks on innocent people and her aggressive behavior toward service workers reveal someone with serious anger management issues. The fact that she blames Peter for her violent outbursts demonstrates her unwillingness to take responsibility for her own actions. Her relationship with Peter, while central to the show, often feels more like mutual exploitation than genuine love. Both characters use each other for their own purposes, with Lois frequently manipulating Peter's stupidity to get her way. This dynamic makes their marriage feel hollow and transactional, rather than romantic or meaningful. Dr. Hartman provides comic relief through his spectacular medical incompetence. His complete cluelessness about basic medical procedures creates absurd situations that highlight the show's willingness to embrace complete nonsense for comedic effect. His survival in his profession defies all logic, which makes him perfect for Family Guy's reality. What makes Dr. Hartman endearing despite his obvious malpractice is his earnest delivery of completely wrong information. He never seems aware of his incompetence, approaching each medical crisis with unwarranted confidence. This combination of ignorance and enthusiasm creates comedy that feels lighthearted rather than mean-spirited. His interactions with patients and their families provide opportunities for misunderstandings that showcase the show's love of absurdist humor. His tendency to deliver completely irrelevant information with the same seriousness as actual medical advice creates confusion that translates into laughs. Dr. Hartman's continued employment at Quahog Hospital raises questions about the town's medical oversight, but viewers have learned to embrace such logical inconsistencies as part of Family Guy's charm. His presence provides reliable comedy without requiring complex character development or emotional investment. Peter Griffin occupies the uncomfortable position of being both the show's protagonist and arguably its most hateable character. His journey from lovable oaf to genuinely problematic individual has paralleled many fans' growing frustration with the series' direction. His behavior has become increasingly cruel and selfish, making him difficult to root for or even tolerate. Peter's treatment of his family represents his worst qualities. His abuse of Meg goes far beyond typical sibling rivalry or parental discipline, crossing into territory that feels genuinely disturbing. His physical violence toward his children and wife, while played for laughs, creates uncomfortable viewing for many fans. His friendship with Joe, Cleveland, and Quagmire often brings out his most selfish instincts. His encouragement of Joe's infidelity and his general disregard for his friend's well-being shows someone who views relationships as sources of entertainment rather than genuine connections. His inability to support others during difficult times reveals his fundamental self-centeredness. Peter's lack of growth or learning represents one of the show's biggest weaknesses. Despite facing consequences for his actions, he never develops genuine understanding or changes his behavior patterns. This static character development makes him feel less like a person and more like a collection of negative traits, designed to drive plot points. His role as father figure is particularly problematic, as his children are forced to navigate their development despite, rather than because, of his influence. His failure to provide guidance, support, or even basic safety for his family makes him one of television's worst fictional parents. The evolution of these characters reflects Family Guy's own journey as a series. Early seasons balanced outrageous humor with genuine character moments that made viewers care about these flawed individuals. As time progressed, the show's emphasis shifted toward shock value and repetitive gags at the expense of character development. Some characters, like Stewie and Joe, have maintained their appeal through consistent characterization and occasional growth. Others, like Brian and Chris, have suffered from writers who seemed more interested in exploiting their worst traits than exploring their potential for development. Still, others, like Peter and Lois, have become any-eaty, increasingly unlikable as their negative qualities have been amplified without corresponding positive growth. The most beloved Family Guy characters tend to possess self-awareness about their flaws or demonstrate genuine care for others despite their problems. Joe's kindness, Stewie's loyalty, and even Carter's honesty about his selfishness make them more palatable than characters who lack these redeeming qualities. Conversely, the most hated characters often combine terrible behavior with hypocrisy or complete lack of self-reflection. Brian's pretentiousness, Lois's manipulation, and Peter's cruelty become harder to tolerate when the characters themselves seem unaware of or indifferent to their impact on others. The show's treatment of these characters also influences fan perception. Characters who face consequences for their actions or show occasional vulnerability tend to maintain viewer sympathy longer than those who seem invulnerable to the effects of their behavior. The Parenter. Writers' willingness to explore character depths versus relying on surface-level gags often determines whether characters remain fresh or become stale. Family Guy's character dynamics work best when they balance outrageous behavior with moments of genuine humanity. The show's finest episodes often feature characters stepping outside their established roles to reveal hidden depths or unexpected kindness. These moments remind viewers why they became invested in these characters originally. As you settle into sleep tonight, consider how these complex personalities have evolved over more than 20 years of television. Some have grown into beloved icons of animated comedy, while others have become cautionary tales about the importance of character development and consistency. The residents of Quahog continue to entertain, frustrate, and surprise audiences with their unpredictable antics. Whether you love them or hate them, these characters have become integral parts of popular culture, inspiring countless discussions, debates, and analyses like this one. Sweet dreams, and may your subconscious sort through the chaos of Family Guy's character landscape as peacefully as possible. Tomorrow brings new episodes, new controversies, and new opportunities to debate the merits and flaws of Seth MacFarlane's animated creation.